Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of David Katz. The Katz family lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and were relatively well off. Richard Katz and Elizabeth were highly educated professionals. Richard worked as an engineer at NASA, designing space technology, while Elizabeth worked in pharmacology. Together, they raised two sons, Brandon and David, in the early years of their marriage. The family enjoyed a happy and loving environment, but as time went on, the boys grew and everything started to change. In 2006, Richard and Elizabeth decided to separate. David Katz struggled with severe mental health issues from a young age. Between the ages of 9 and 12, he visited numerous psychiatrists who prescribed him strong medications, including antidepressants and antipsychotics. His parents' disagreement over how to manage his condition was a major factor in their decision to separate. Brandon and David faced significant challenges during this difficult period in their lives. His classmates described David as shy, quiet, and antisocial. David kept to himself, rarely made friends, and preferred solitude. He was also deeply passionate about video games, spending most of his free time in his room playing Madden NFL, a sports simulation game. Madden NFL, named after coach and sports commentator John Madden, is a popular series of American football video games. With a new edition released annually, David graduated from Hammond High School in 2011. He enrolled at the University of Maryland to study environmental science. However, he showed little interest in his studies or pursuing a career. Instead, he became increasingly absorbed in the virtual world. Dedicating almost all his time to gaming, David's commitment to his hobby paid off, as he developed exceptional skills in playing Madden NFL over the years. In June 2017, David Katz competed in a professional gaming tournament for the first time. Using the nickname Bread, he entered the Madden Championship and won the title. Initially as the 7 seed, David was seen as an underdog. However, he surprised everyone with his skills, defeating his opponents and earning recognition. In an interview, he confidently stated, "I don't consider myself the 7th seed. I consider myself the best player. And I like that I was able to prove that." Fellow players congratulated him on his victory and wished him success in future competitions. David was ecstatic about his win and felt on top of the world, also taking home a $10 cash prize. He continued to enter several other tournaments, but did not achieve similar success despite the loss. He remained undeterred. He built a career in the gaming world, earning an income and establishing a strong reputation in the community. Today, many gamers look up to him as an inspiration for pursuing a career in gaming. David's online popularity grew, but things were not as bright for him in real life. David was born in 1993, and his childhood was marked by challenges. Over the first 16 years of his life, 26 calls were made to the police from the Katz family home, mainly due to domestic disputes and conflicts. Despite the medications, his condition showed little improvement. 2 years later, in 2007, he was hospitalized at Shepherd Pratt Psychiatric Hospital. During his stay, doctors increased the dosage of his antidepressants. That year, David was treated at 4 different psychiatric hospitals. By this time, David's parents were divorced, and he was alternating between living at his mother's and father's homes, along with his older brother, Brandon. However, David spent most of his time with his mother. He confided in close friends that he hated living with her and wished he could live with his father. However, according to custody court documents, this was not permitted. Elizabeth twice packed David's belongings into a suitcase and forced him to leave the house. One of these incidents occurred on Mother's Day in 2007. That same year, he was enrolled in a treatment program for troubled teens. Spending several months in the wilderness, Elizabeth admitted him to the program without seeking approval from her ex-husband. 2 years later, on December 22, 2009, David wrote a letter to the judge while his parents' custody battle was still ongoing. In the letter, he expressed his feelings. "Dear Judge, today is my 1/6th birthday. I live with my mom, but I've wanted to live with my dad for a long time. My mom has called the police about 20 times over minor issues. Like me being a little late getting home, she also drinks and yells at me, poking me with her finger and refusing to leave me alone. In the past, she used to hit me. She takes my belongings just because she feels like it and has sent me to psychiatric hospitals twice for no real reason. I can't talk to her because I see her more than anyone else, and she'll most likely just yell at me again. She lies all the time." When David became an adult, his medical visits significantly decreased, though the reason for this remains unclear. However, it is known that he continued to struggle with mental health issues. He rarely bathed, sometimes going weeks without washing, and often spent entire days playing video games, especially his favorite, Madden NFL. He would stay up until 4 a.m. and frequently paced in circles around the house. David was diagnosed with dysthymia, a chronic mood disorder characterized by low energy and a persistent, mild depressive state. Unlike major depression, dysthymia lasts much longer. People with this condition often mistake their symptoms as part of their personality, and only a qualified specialist can provide an accurate diagnosis. In addition to dysthymia, David was also diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, a condition defined by frequent anger, irritability, and defiance toward authority figures. For David, these authority figures were his parents. Over time, David became increasingly detached from reality. He spent almost all his time online and rarely interacted with people face to face. While he was recognized as a talented Madden player, other gamers found him socially awkward and withdrawn at tournaments. He often made blunt, insulting remarks, avoided eye contact, and showed little to no emotion. David refused to engage with other players, did not seek friendships, and declined to shake hands with opponents. Regardless of whether he won or lost, David was always considered an unusual person, but no one ever felt uncomfortable around him. That all suddenly changed in the summer of 2018. Good Luck, Have Fun Game Bar, an arcade venue at the Jacksonville Landing Indoor Market, hosted a Madden NFL 19 video game tournament on August 26, 2018, with approximately 130 to 150 participants and spectators in attendance. At around 1 p.m., David was eliminated from the tournament after losing to his main competitor, Elijah Clayton. David was visibly upset after the loss and refused to shake Elijah's hand. His frustration stemmed not only from the defeat, but also from a contentious history between the two. Elijah had frequently mocked David for his social awkwardness before the tournament. David had written a guide to help players improve their Madden skills, but Elijah shared it online without permission, depriving David of the opportunity to monetize his work. They had also had a tense incident earlier at another tournament when they both called a taxi to the airport. When the car arrived, Elijah quickly got in, closed the door in David's face, and left alone. Back to the event on August 26. After losing to his longtime rival Elijah, David left the game bar and went to a nearby pizzeria. While there, he removed his sunglasses, placed them on the edge of a table, abruptly stood up, and left at 1:30 p.m. David returned to the event. Where the tournament was still ongoing, he pulled a weapon from his backpack and dropped the backpack on the floor. None of the gamers present realized the tragedy that was about to unfold, and the entire event was being streamed live on social platforms. David aimed his weapon directly at Elijah. At that moment, the live stream camera briefly focused on Elijah, showing a red laser dot from David's weapon sight on his chest. Seconds later, as the camera switched back to the game, David attacked him. Elijah was struck by 3 bullets, one in the chest, one in the forehead, and one in the right eye. He died instantly. Still seated in his chair after killing Elijah, David began attacking others in the game bar. The attack lasted about 20 seconds before David turned the weapon on himself and ended his own life. By 1:35 p.m., the first responders, a fire brigade conducting training exercises near the game bar, arrived at the scene of the tragedy and provided aid to the victims. In total, David Katz injured 12 people. 2 of them, along with David, died, while the remaining 10 suffered non-fatal injuries. The victims who were killed were Elijah Clayton and Taylor Robertson, who was attacked in the back as he tried to flee from the game bar. Elijah Clayton, 22 years old, known in the gaming community by the nickname True Boy. From Woodland Hills, California, he was a high school graduate, played football, and had a passion for video games. Initially, Elijah had not planned to attend the Madden NFL 19 championship, but changed his mind at the last minute and decided to participate. Taylor Robertson, 27 years old, from Ballard, West Virginia, is a professional gamer known by the nickname Spot Me Pluz outside of gaming. He worked as an accountant and credit analyst at a major bank and had a family. During the investigation, police discovered that David had severe mental health issues. Detectives initially believed his motive was rage over losing to a rival. However, it was later revealed that David had been planning the crime 2 weeks before the tournament. He legally purchased 2 firearms equipped with high-precision sights in his home state of Maryland. David stored the firearms in his car and brought them to the tournament. He carried a weapon on his belt, which he never used, and kept another weapon in his backpack, which he used to kill 2 gamers before taking his own life. Police were puzzled by how David was able to purchase the weapons so easily, as this appeared to be a clear violation by the firearms seller. Soon, details about David Katz's troubled life came to light. It was revealed that he had been prescribed strong antidepressants and antipsychotic medications from an early age and had been treated in psychiatric hospitals multiple times. This was likely a significant factor in the case. David was far younger than recommended when he started using these drugs. Sadly, before the tragedy happened, no one could have predicted that this quiet, introverted young man could act so coldly. Perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented if the game bar had security measures like metal detectors in place. This might have stopped David from bringing weapons to the tournament so easily following the Jacksonville attack. Numerous lawsuits were filed against the organizers of the Madden NFL 19 event, the game bar owner, the pizzeria, and the seller who sold David Katz 2 weapons. All parties were held accountable. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blagg family. Jennifer Blagg was born on January 8, 1967, in Oklahoma, USA. She grew up with her mother and 1 brother, and they were very close from a young age. Jennifer was creative, sociable, and enjoyed playing the piano and dancing. However, she faced a traumatic experience in childhood when, at the age of 12, she was raped by a family friend who was much older than her. This incident deeply affected her, and it took a long time for her to heal. Despite this, she eventually overcame her feelings of resentment, pain, and anger, graduated from high school, and went on to attend college. Her future husband, Michael, was born into a military family. They frequently moved due to his father's career as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Growing up in such an environment was challenging, but Michael was a calm and obedient child. Michael was hardworking and intelligent. He even participated in a program sponsored by the governor to study nuclear physics, for which he received an honorary diploma. He continued to pursue his studies in science thereafter. Michael achieved everything by his own labor because nothing in life came to him easily. He later shared that during this time, he worked as a pizza delivery driver to cover his college expenses. At 21, he married his first wife, but after about a year of constant issues in their relationship, they decided to get a divorce. In 2008, Jennifer enrolled at San Diego State University to pursue a business degree. Meanwhile, Michael chose to follow his father's path and joined the Navy, where he became a decorated Gulf War veteran and helicopter pilot. After returning from a business trip, he had some free time to explore the city. He attended a party with mutual friends, where he met Jennifer. They feel an attraction to each other, and Michael asked her out on a date, which she accepted. They went to the movies and afterward decided to start dating. In 1991, Michael and Jennifer got married and moved to the quiet town of Simpsonville in Southern California. They enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and made many friends through their church. As a deeply religious couple, they seemed well prepared to start a family, even though Michael was often away serving in the Navy. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Abby. After her birth, Michael left the military and secured a high-paying engineering job with a flexible schedule, allowing him to spend more time with his family. In his spare time, Michael began teaching Sunday school, which he considered important. However, due to Michael's job, they had to move several times, which was challenging for Jennifer. She often felt like just as she was settling into a new city and making new friends, her family had to move again. Despite her struggles, but when Michael proposed moving, Jennifer easily accepted because of her religious beliefs. Their final move occurred in 2001, when they decided to settle in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was a small, cozy town known as a winter resort, surrounded by mountains that attracted wealthy tourists. In Grand Junction, Michael took on an important role as an engineer for a company in that city. He also began teaching at the local Sunday school affiliated with the church. The family was very religious, and friends mentioned that they prayed about nearly every decision they made together. By 2001, Abby was 6 years old. She was getting ready for school and attended preparatory courses at a Christian school, where her mother, Jennifer, worked as a teacher's assistant. Abby was kind and helpful, assisting her parents with various household chores. She is also very religious, like her father and mother. On November 1, 2001, Michael called 911. The police were called and, upon arrival, they met Michael. According to Michael, he had just returned home from work and was immediately concerned when he saw the open door, because his family is always closed. As he entered the house, he didn't see anyone inside. In the bedroom, he discovered blood on bed, which dripped onto the floor. He also noticed that his wife's jewelry box was empty and that her handbag was on the floor, scattered with other belongings. Despite searching the entire house, he could not find his wife or daughter. Michael believed they were still alive and thought they might have been kidnapped, so he called for help. Based on the large amount of blood found, the police suspected that it was unlikely Jennifer and Abby were alive. They feared both may have been murdered. Since the Colorado River was nearby, the authorities considered the possibility that the bodies could have been disposed of in the river. They thoroughly searched the area, but found no signs of Jennifer and Abby. As the search operation expanded, volunteers and search teams joined forces to scour the surrounding region for any evidence related to Jennifer and Abby. Additionally, relatives of Jennifer traveled to the city to help with the search. While the search was ongoing, forensic experts examined the Blagg family home and collected various documents for analysis. They discovered significant amounts of blood on the bed and several fingerprints, which were sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also interviewed neighbors to piece together the timeline of incident from that day, but the neighbors did not see Jennifer and Abby. Michael was at work during the attack, a fact supported by CCTV footage and his colleagues' testimonies. He stated that he saw Jennifer and Abby alive early that morning, indicating that the attack likely occurred before he returned home from work. However, Michael was not excluded from the suspect list, as close family members are often scrutinized in such cases. However, it was crucial to verify the details carefully. The police interviewed Michael at the station, where he provided a thorough account of the incident from the previous day. He mentioned that around 7 p.m., Jennifer received a call from a friend who invited her to meet the following evening. After that, they watched TV and prepared for bed. By around 10 p.m., the entire family had gone to their rooms. Michael noted that early in the morning, when he woke up for work, Jennifer and Abby were still asleep. They were scheduled to get up around 6:30 to allow him to take Abby to her preparatory classes at school. After that, Jennifer returned home to take care of her daily tasks. Her husband Michael usually called her several times a day, but on that day, she didn't answer his calls. Assuming she might be busy, Michael didn't immediately worry. He then called her friend, assuming they decided to meet during the day, but the friend didn't know her whereabouts. Michael then continued with his day. He assumed she was at home, doing the laundry, cleaning, and cooking dinner. As soon as Michael returned home from work, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. There are two things that make him feel unusual. His daughter, Abby, didn't greet him as she usually did, and there was no smell of dinner cooking, which was unexpected since his wife Jennifer had planned to cook before meeting her friend. The scene became even more ominous when he spotted blood and immediately dialed the police. To preserve the crime scene, Michael went outside and waited for the police to arrive. The detectives then took over the investigation, and their inquiries led them to Abby's school. They discovered that she hadn't attended classes that day, which didn't surprise her teachers. Apparently, someone had called the class teacher the day before, claiming to be Abby's father and informing the school that she would be absent. The teacher wasn't suspicious at the time, but they did recall that a man, claiming to be Michael, had made the call. However, when questioned, Michael denied making the call, which only increased the suspicions about him. Further investigations revealed that Jennifer's friend from church, Melson, had noticed trouble in the Blagg family's relationship. Melson reported that Jennifer appeared to be extremely afraid of Michael. Jennifer only felt comfortable meeting in secret when Michael was not around. Jennifer had likely been forbidden by Michael from having visitors at their home. On one occasion, when Melson visited their house at length, Jennifer became anxious and hastily asked her to leave, probably to avoid Michael finding out that her had been to their house. The day before Jennifer's disappearance, Melson contacted Jennifer to invite her and Abby to visit. Notably, she specified that Michael, her husband, would not accompany them, which was unusual since the family typically traveled together. Melson agreed but thought the arrangement was peculiar. It was clear that Jennifer had recently argued with Michael and wanted space from him. Despite the plans, Jennifer never showed up the following morning. Later, investigators discovered voice messages from Michael to Jennifer, in which he sent her well wishes and affectionate greetings. However, authorities suspect that these messages may have been part of a setup, as it's possible that both Jennifer and Abby were already dead when the messages were sent. This thing raised suspicion about Michael's involvement, but he insisted on his innocence. He even gave interviews to journalists, expressing frustration that the police were focusing on him, and even they overlooking other suspects. Michael said he was deeply concerned about his wife and daughter's whereabouts and felt the real perpetrator was still at large. He has offered a $3,000 reward for any information that could help speed up the investigation. The detectives remained suspicious of Michael's behavior, so they decided to monitor him closely. During their investigation, they discovered blood on the bed, but strangely, very little was found on the surrounding walls. Normally, blood splatters and scatters in various directions, but in this case, that wasn't the case. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the bed belonged to Jennifer. Additionally, when the detectives applied luminol to the family van, they found several hidden blood stains on the door and inside the vehicle, suggesting that it had been used to transport the victims, Abby and Jennifer. Michael reported to work on the day his wife and daughter disappeared. An investigation of the house revealed 55 fingerprints, many of which belonged to Michael. Notably, 17 fingerprints were unidentified, and 6 of those were small to potentially belong to young daughter, Abby. Despite this, Michael claimed that he had seen nothing unusual and pointed out that it was normal for family members' fingerprints to be present in the home. As the investigation continued, Michael relocated to a different house and didn't return to the original one, even after restrictions were lifted. He chose not to clean and no return to the house, stating that it was too painful for him. However, this decision ultimately worked in the police's favor as they were able to periodically examine the crime scene. In interviews with journalists, Michael portrayed the disappearance as resembling a robbery, citing the missing jewelry and money from the house. He also mentioned that there had been a string of burglaries in the area over the past year, suggesting that his family had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Michael, the thieves may have broken in while his family was asleep, inadvertently targeting them. He suspected that the robbers were provoked by something when they entered his house. Even so, he held on to the hope that his wife and daughter were still alive. He often referenced Bible verses when communicating with the media, maintaining his innocence when questioned by the media and the police. However, detectives were convinced that the incident was not a robbery, as they found no signs of forced entry. They believed that the stolen items in the house were just a setup to distract the investigation. The police noted that robbers typically target empty homes to avoid confrontations and complications. If they encountered occupants, they wouldn't waste time and energy brutally killing them. Instead, they would opt for a quicker method. In the Blagg family home, a diary belonging to Jennifer was discovered. In it, she wrote about having a severe argument with Michael the day before her disappearance and fearing that he might harm her. Although she didn't elaborate on the details, she framed the situation in biblical terms. The detectives were unclear about the argument and approached Michael for clarification, but he maintained he had no memory of it. However, the police discovered a note addressed to him, apologizing for allowing negativity to creep back into their lives, suggesting relationship problems. When examining the Blagg family computer, the police were surprised to find thousands of hardcore pornography images. However, Michael denied any involvement in the images, he claiming that his wife was trying to spice up their lives. A further investigation showed that Michael and Jennifer's relationship had been troubled for a while. Michael had initially hired an escort out of curiosity, but over time he became hooked on the services. When investigators visited Michael's new house to question him, but no one opened the door, despite his car being parked outside. After hearing the sound of running water, they broke down the door and found Michael in the bathtub with cuts on his wrists that he had done to himself. In his hand, he was holding a photo of Abby and Jennifer, a Bible, and a note claiming he was not involved in their murders. Michael was rushed to the hospital, where he received medical treatment and survived. During the investigation, the sheriff's department received an anonymous tip about Michael's van being spotted near Ridge Park on the day Abby and Jennifer disappeared. This location was only a minute from them home. As a result, the police resumed their search, focusing on a 60-kilometers radius around them home. The new search lasted for 11 days, but failed to yield any results in the specified area. Subsequently, the police obtained new information. Michael was suspected of stealing an industrial item worth about $500 from his workplace shortly before Abby and Jennifer disappeared. Detectives called Michael in for questioning, suspecting he might be involved in the workplace incident. Michael broke down in tears, fearing he would be falsely accused of his family's murder, but he did not confess to the crime. Later, he explained that his emotional reaction was triggered by the fear of being wrongly accused of killing his family. A colleague of Michael contacted the police and provided crucial information. On the day Jennifer disappeared, Michael took out the trash at work, which was unusual since it was not part of his job. According to the colleague, they normally took turns doing this task. However, on that particular day, Michael insisted on doing it himself. He reacted aggressively when his colleague offered to help. It now seemed clear that Michael was trying to dispose of evidence. On June 5, 2002, the police discovered a woman's body that matched Jennifer's description. The body was wrapped in some type of cover and had holes in it, with a bullet still lodged in her head. It appeared that the killer had discarded her body in a landfill. Forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the murdered woman was indeed Jennifer. They determined that she died from a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Additionally, they also was established that she was killed while sleeping, as a retainer was found in her mouth, which she only wore at night. Unfortunately, the body had lain in the open for 7 months, and as a result, the remains were severely decomposed, providing limited information for the investigators. Investigators found that there were several garbage sites assigned to different companies. After digging at the location where the Jennifer's body was found, they confirmed that this particular area was managed by the company where Michael worked. The police, considering this coincidence to be more than accidental, they intensified their search for Abby's body at the dump but were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed that Michael had left the city without warning, relocating to a different state. Although Abby's body was not found at the dump, the evidence was sufficient to charge Michael with the murder of Abby and Jennifer. The relatives of Jennifer were deeply upset by the manner in which her body was treated, and they strongly suspected Michael of disposing of Abby's bodies in a similar way. The detectives were unable to find anyone who knew the suspect Michael well enough to approach. However, they then discovered that his mother was still alive. Since she lived in Georgia, a state he often visited, the detectives decided to pay her a visit. Upon arriving at her house, they were met by a man. He was identified as Michael, who was subsequently arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges of double first-degree murder. Following Michael's capture, the search teams decided to re-examine the landfill area. They regrouped and brought in volunteers to aid in the search. Over the course of 7 weeks, they searched through 7,000 tons of trash, but unfortunately, they never found Abby's body. The prosecutor's office suspected that Michael was living a double life. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, but in reality, Michael was manipulative and cruel. However, his first wife did not support these claims, stating that she had never experienced insults or physical abuse from him. In contrast, several witnesses reported that Michael's relationship with Jennifer was troubled from the start, with frequent arguments even before they got married. Michael and Jennifer's issues stemmed from Michael's love for partying and spending time with friends, while Jennifer wanted to build a strong family and asked him to stop going out. Eventually, Jennifer issued an ultimatum, and Michael chose to commit to her. They got married, and soon after, they had a child. During this time, Michael was still serving in the Navy, which often left Jennifer alone to cope with postpartum depression and care for their newborn daughter. Although she faced many difficulties, but Jennifer never complained. However, the relationship began to deteriorate due to domestic issues. After that, Michael found a job as an engineer, and things seemed to improve. He also started teaching at a Sunday school. However, his fellow teachers disagreed with his teaching methods and views on discussing topics like sex and abortion with teenagers. His liberal approach clashed with the conservative values of the Sunday school, leading to him having to quit his job there. Following this, the Blagg family traveled a bit more before settling in a new location to start fresh. This move resulted in big debt because their house in South Carolina took a long time to sell. Jennifer was initially unhappy in their new home and frequently called her friends, wishing to return. However, since Michael was earning a good income and managing to pay off their debts, she chose to stay with him during this challenging time. Before the violent incident occurred, there seemed to be a serious issue in the marriage. A local law firm employee reported that a few days before Jennifer's disappearance, she sought marriage and family counseling. Unfortunately, she was turned away because the lawyer was on vacation. Jennifer revealed that she had been a victim of Michael's violence and wanted to initiate a divorce. The firm intended to assist her as soon as they returned, but she vanished before they could meet again. Although police searched her house, car, and garage, they found no traces of her blood. However, it was suspected that Abby was likely murdered because she may have witnessed her mother's, Jennifer, murder. It was believed that she was probably strangled, which could explain why there were no blood traces found. The prosecutor's office decided to pause proceedings to gather information about the child Abby. Without a body, proving the murder would be extremely challenging. Michael was released on bail and allowed to stay with his mother within the city while awaiting the hearing. Michael claimed he could not have killed his family, stating he had no motive. He insisted that family relations were good and mentioned he had been preparing for Christmas by buying gifts worth over $5,000 for his loved ones. However, no one found his claims credible. The hearings were scheduled for March 2004. It was believed that Jennifer wanted to end her relationship with her husband, Michael, who did not agree and became angry. The prosecutor's office suspected that he killed both his wife and possibly their daughter during the night, then hid their bodies and went to work in the morning, trying to dispose of them with the trash. After his work shift, Michael returned home and called the police. Jennifer's mother testified for the prosecution. At first, she supported Michael, but her opinion changed when she saw the evidence. She claimed that Michael had been abusive to Jennifer for a long time, particularly when he was drinking. During those times, he would often attack and choke Jennifer, sometimes leaving her unconscious. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael guilty of murdering Jennifer and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on April 16, 2004. Although the trial concluded, but Michael's story did not end there. 10 years later, Michael had a chance to retry his case. Throughout the years, his lawyers searched for any possible ways to appeal. One major issue was that one of the jurors was blind, making it difficult for him to fully assess the evidence presented. Additionally, a female juror had intentionally provided false information on her questionnaire. She later confessed, explaining that her bias against Michael stemmed from her own experiences as a long-term victim of domestic violence. This affected her ability to objectively consider the details of the case, resulting in her vote against him. As a result, the verdict was overturned, and preparations for a new trial began. The lying juror was found guilty of contempt of court and received the 10-day prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. In a surprising turn, the defense introduced a new suspect, a man named Philip Ruins, from Montana. He was linked to a series of brutal rapes, and both Jennifer and Abby were among his many victims. In November 2001, it was reported that he was in Colorado around the same time Abby and Jennifer went missing. Philip had a history of brutal crimes but had never faced punishment until now. In 201st, a new trial was held for him. This time, the prosecution called in an expert to analyze the crime scene. The expert suggested that the arrangement of objects in the house indicated a staged crime rather than a genuine robbery. He noted that the crime was executed clumsily and unprofessionally. According to his assessment, Jennifer was shot while she was asleep in her bed. The assailant then held her down until her heart stopped, after which he removed her body from the house and placed it in a van. Unfortunately, the expert could not provide any useful information about Abby due to a lack of evidence. Michael's family said he was heartbroken after his wife and daughter went missing. They all embraced and cried together, creating a deeply emotional scene. They found it hard to believe that he could be involved in his wife's murder. During the interrogation and trial, Michael remained quiet and composed, showing little emotion. The prosecutor interpreted his calm demeanor as a sign of guilt. However, Michael's lawyer argued that such behavior was typical for a conservative husband. Despite the lawyer's efforts, Michael was once again found guilty of murdering his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, investigators were also looking into Philip. He was a convicted sexual predator serving 200 years for creating and distributing child pornography and for sexually abusing minors. Philip lured his young victims through his online forum. When police searched Philip's home, they discovered a list of victims' names that included Jennifer and Abby, with the date of the kidnapping coincides with the time of their disappearance. However, there is no physical evidence linking Philip to this crime, no fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene, and his handwriting did not match any evidence. Additionally, it is unclear how Jennifer's body ended up in the landfill, where trash from her husband's workplace was dumped. As a result, investigators did not believe Philip was involved in the murder of Jennifer or the disappearance of Abby. However, the trial against Philip Ruins for various charges was difficult. Many of his victims experienced significant mental health problems due to the violence they endured. Some faced substance addiction, while others suffered from persistent nightmares. Unfortunately, there has been little advancement in the investigation into Abby's disappearance, as Philip has not admitted to the murders of either Jennifer or Abby. Abby's body has still not been located, and her fate remains unknown. She could possibly still be alive. A portrait of Abby has been created, and debates are ongoing about whether Michael is truly guilty of his wife's murder or if he was wrongfully convicted. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. Carroll, Ohio, is home to several families, including the Richardson family. This family consists of Kim and Scott Richardson, who are very involved in their children's lives. Their son, Jackson, loves playing football, while their daughter, Brooke Skylar, commonly known as Skylar, is a cheerleader. Skylar has struggled with an eating disorder since she was very young. Her mother, Kim, first noticed the problem when Skylar was in 6th grade at the age of 12. Skylar's hyperfocus on food and exercise became very apparent when she refused to buy gum because it had more than 5 calories. As a cheerleader, Skylar needs to be light and easy to throw. The pressure to maintain a certain weight makes her battle with weight loss even more difficult. She is constantly preoccupied with her body image and is afraid of gaining weight. Skylar's struggle with her weight and body image began due ring cheerleading practice. In an effort to maintain her weight, she started vomiting after meals. However, this behavior only worsened her problems once practice ended. After that, Skylar's struggle with her weight became more intense. She may experience periods of overeating in a short time, consuming more than her body needs. This is often accompanied by periods of starvation, during which Skylar restricts her food intake or follows a strict diet. Skylar's parents noticed changes in her behavior and became concerned about her health. They tried to express these concerns to her, but whenever the subject was brought up, Skylar became quiet. She did not want to talk about it and always refused any attempts to address her weight changes. Skylar's parents sought help from various professionals, including doctors and therapists, hoping that these interventions would help their daughter reduce her anxiety. After a clinical evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphic disorder. This psychological condition causes individuals to focus excessively on a perceived flaw in their appearance, leading to impairment in daily functioning and distress. In July 2016, during her senior year of high school, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin. However, the relationship did not last, and by January 2017, Skylar had a new boyfriend, a high school student named Brandon. Skylar was in a good mood and appeared to have gained weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, believed that their daughter's eating disorder had improved. They noticed that she looked healthy and genuinely happy. In February, Skylar chose a tight-fitting evening gown that required a tie. In mid-March, she went on vacation with her family. During the trip, she wore a two-piece swimsuit, and her mother commented that she looked great. Kim believed that her daughter and Brandon were having sex, so she wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills. She thought this would protect her daughter's health and prevent the risk of an unwanted pregnancy. In mid-April 2017, Skylar went to her mother's gynecologist to get a prescription for birth control pills while her mother, Kim, waited outside the clinic. After seeing the doctor, Skylar left the clinic with tears in her eyes. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so sad, and Skylar replied that it was a painful experience for her. Kim believed her daughter was telling the truth, unaware of the real reason behind the tears. During Skylar's visit to her OB/GYN, the doctor informed her that she was about 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor not to reveal this information to anyone, as she was not ready to share the news with her family. On May 5th, 9 days later, Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon went to prom. Even though Skylar was in the final stages of her pregnancy, she still managed to fit into her prom dress. 2 weeks after Skylar attended the prom, on July 14, 2017, police officers arrived at her home to meet with her parents, Kim and Scott. The officers stated that they needed to talk to Skylar about an incident she may have witnessed and assured her that nothing was wrong. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, where they wanted to question her about an emergency call the police had received from a fertility clinic. Specifically, the doctor had reported that a patient had just given birth and may have buried the baby in the yard. After receiving this notice, the police immediately arrested Skylar and took her to a room for questioning. They did not allow her father to participate in the questioning. Before the questioning began, the police explained her rights to her. The investigator then started asking questions about the phone call from the doctor's office. The caller informed the police that on April 26, a doctor had examined Skylar and concluded that she was pregnant. However, Skylar later revealed to the doctor that the baby was dead and that she had buried the baby in her backyard. During her interview with the police, Skylar recounted a tragic event from her past. On May 7, 2017, she said that she had given birth to a baby girl in the bathroom, but the baby was not breathing and had no heartbeat. Therefore, she decided to bury the baby alone and did not tell anyone about the incident. To do this, Skylar quietly went downstairs, took a garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard, where she buried the baby. She then left a vase with flowers at the burial site to mark and remember her deceased child. During a conversation with her parents, Skylar announced that she had chosen the name Annabelle for the baby and revealed that the baby's father was the cousin of a close friend she had dated briefly before meeting Brandon. Crime scene investigators went to the Richardson home to search for the child's remains. They searched the backyard by pulling weeds and sweeping the ground. The police carried out this process meticulously and carefully, removing any debris that might hinder their investigation. After overcoming the difficulties caused by the overgrown vegetation, they were able to collect a significant amount of evidence. After removing the weeds and cleaning the area, the police found several human bones, including skull fragments. These bones were carefully collected and placed in small body bags to preserve the evidence. Investigators ensured that the bones were kept intact. Later, one investigator noted that the bones had a smell, while another had difficulty determining whether they were rocks or human bones due to their small size. At the same time, the coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and small fingernails, but no organs or items that could help identify. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, just 6 days after the incident, Skylar was contacted by the police and told that she needed to come to the police station again. To reassure her father, Scott, the police assured her that she would not face any legal action. During Skylar's next meeting with the police, they informed her that they had received new information from the medical examiner's office. This information revealed the discrepancy between Skylar's original story and what the police had discovered. Specifically, the medical examiner had found that the baby's bones showed signs of being burned, based on an analysis of the remains. Skylar was confused by the news of the baby being burned. She claimed that she did not set the fire and denied harming her child. However, the police still wanted Skylar to admit that she had killed her daughter and then burned the body to hide the evidence. During the investigation, the police suggested that Skylar may have wanted to cremate the baby so that the ashes would not be scattered. However, this suggestion only made Skylar more confused, and she still insisted that she did not burn the baby. Skylar suddenly changed her story to the police, saying that she had a lighter and may have used it to try to burn the baby's remains. She also suggested that the baby may have been born alive and had been crying, even making gurgling or small noises at one point. Additionally, Skylar admitted that she had held the newborn too tightly, which may have led to the baby's death. During an hour-long interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. Law enforcement suspected that Skylar had caused the child's death by suffocation. After presenting her case to a grand jury, she was charged with aggravated murder, a crime that carries a life sentence in Ohio. Skylar pleaded not guilty to other charges, including involuntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and child abuse. She spent several days in jail until her family was able to post $50,000 bail to secure her temporary release. Following her child's death, Skylar became the focus of media attention and was subjected to intense public scrutiny. This severely affected her family's daily life. They felt unsafe and were forced to retreat into their home to seek peace and quiet. The threats had disastrous consequences, making it even harder for them to step outside. People who saw them often took pictures, which added to their stress and put enormous pressure on them. The constant public scrutiny became unbearable and affected almost every aspect of their daily lives. Although Skylar's lawyer believes that she made a false confession and that her newborn baby's death was not intentional, the prosecution has not changed its position. Despite new evidence that contradicts their initial assessment, they continue to pursue the case. A key piece of evidence that the prosecution initially presented was the results of a medical expert's examination, which stated that the child's remains had been burned. However, after a thorough examination and additional information, the expert retracted his initial assessment. Following a detailed physical examination of the child, the expert concluded that there was no evidence of burning. The prosecution's approach remained unchanged despite the new information. They continued to focus on Skylar's confession that she had tried to burn the remains, but this contradicted the evidence and raised questions about whether their case was actually convincing. This shows that the state was convicting despite flaws in the evidence. Skylar's lawyers fought hard at trial to defend her against the charges. Thanks to the efforts of her family, Skylar was able to raise the $50,000 bail she needed to be released. However, her bail was conditional on her wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet that would track her whereabouts. Skylar has been largely confined to her home and has had limited public exposure. She feels isolated and prefers to spend most of her time with her family dogs. Over the past 12 months, Skylar's life has undergone major changes as her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati have been put on hold while she awaits trial for her child's murder. The charges were so serious that Skylar's attorney filed a motion to change the venue, but the court denied it. As a result, Skylar was forced to continue attending the trial in the original jurisdiction as planned. The stress and pressure of the trial weighed heavily on her life. Moreover, Skylar had to deal with the psychological and emotional trauma caused by the charges, along with social isolation. Spending time with her dogs brought her comfort and a sense of solace. They became her trusted companions and main support during the time she awaited the trial. At the same time, her family remained by her side, supporting and encouraging her through this difficult period. They expressed their belief in her innocence and hoped that the truth would soon be revealed. Despite the difficult challenges, Skylar persisted in fighting for her freedom. In July 2019, the state made a surprise offer to Skylar's defense attorney. Skylar would plead guilty to the remaining charges and serve a 15-year prison sentence. In exchange, the state would withdraw the felony murder charge. Skylar's parents were uncertain about the decision and debated whether she should accept the deal. After careful consideration, Skylar decided to decline the offer. Her parents were deeply troubled by her decision and wondered if their daughter had made the right choice. However, they understood that it was ultimately Skylar's choice, and they had to respect it. On September 3, 2019, Skylar went to trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. During the trial, the state presented preliminary evidence, including a series of text messages that Skylar had sent to her mother. In these messages, she expressed her happiness after giving birth. She also shared that she was very pleased because her belly had returned to its normal size, stating that she would not allow it to return to how it was before. Notably, this message was sent just hours after she gave birth. Skylar texted her mother, "I am really speechless because I am so happy. My belly is back." On the second day of the trial, the prosecution presented new information about Skylar. They stated that Skylar sent several text messages to her mother and boyfriend less than a day after she killed her baby. These messages indicated that Skylar seemed very happy about her baby's death. The prosecution argued that these messages were critical evidence suggesting Skylar's involvement in the baby's death. In one message, Skylar wrote to her mother that she was excited because dinner was coming up and she could wear a cute outfit. She mentioned that her belly had just returned to normal and wanted to take advantage of this time to make things great. However, this text message could be interpreted as an attempt to mask her feelings of guilt, while simultaneously being excited about no longer being pregnant. The state argued that Skylar's use of the word excited suggested she was genuinely happy that her baby had died. They also presented evidence of a text message that Skylar sent to her boyfriend in which she stated that although the night before had been the worst, she felt much lighter and happier the next morning. According to the state, this text message implies that Skylar felt unburdened by the death of her baby. The state's position is that Skylar did not want to have the baby. They acknowledged that they could not provide concrete evidence that the baby was born alive. However, they pointed out that Skylar had admitted in her police interview that she heard the baby gurgling and crying. The state alleged that Skylar had searched the internet for information about abortion. It was also alleged that Skylar's mother, Kim, warned her that she would lose everything if she became pregnant. This warning instilled great fear in Skylar, causing her to try to keep her pregnancy a secret. When she could no longer hide her condition, she decided to take drastic measures. On the third day of Skylar's trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on the baby testified. The autopsy revealed that the baby's cause of death was homicide. However, the doctor could not determine when the fractures in the baby's skull occurred, whether they happened before or after the baby died. In forming his opinion regarding the cause of the fractures, the doctor relied on Skylar's statements during the police interview. Skylar's defense attorney challenged the doctor's testimony, arguing that the doctor may have been biased in confirming the information. According to the attorney, the doctor had already formed an opinion and did not want to change it. During questioning, the doctor admitted that she had never examined the remains of the deceased child under a microscope. The defense attorney then asked the doctor if she had consulted with obstetricians. The doctor answered no. The attorney also asked if the doctor had seen photographs of the burial site or the backyard of Skylar's home. Again, the doctor replied no. Another doctor, specializing in fetal medicine, testified during the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily when questioned by the prosecution. He stated that he suspected Skylar's baby was stillborn and added that she had only performed one screening. Knowing that the margin of error for fundal height measurements during the third trimester of pregnancy is 60%, he believed that Skylar could be carrying a healthy baby. He thought this was possible because Skylar had felt the baby move, and a dead baby would not normally move. He also questioned the report from the doctor who had provided information to the defense. The doctor had stated that Skylar's baby would likely have developmental problems. During cross-examination by the defense attorney, he asked the doctor if the prosecution had paid him. The doctor responded that he was paid $5,000 a day because that was the cost the hospital had to pay for another doctor when they were short-staffed. As the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, more shocking and heartbreaking evidence was introduced in court. The evidence that had the strongest impact on Skylar was the images of the deceased child's remains shown on the television screen. These images left a deep and lasting impression on Skylar, as was evident in her reaction during the trial. When the images of her child's remains appeared on the screen, Skylar initially tried not to look at them. Her remarkably calm demeanor at that moment was a stark contrast to the day before when she had been visibly shaken for a moment before the judge began the jury selection process. When Skylar's defense attorneys presented their case, they argued that her life had been flawed and challenging even before she was charged with murder. They argued that much prosecution evidence presented a partial truth, with some documents was taken out. Skylar's defense attorney argued that her frequent texting was not evidence that she killed her daughter. Instead, the attorney wanted to highlight Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly an eating disorder that she had been battling since she was 12. This was supported by several pieces of evidence, including Skylar seeing a psychologist and nutritionist regularly for treatment of her eating disorder. To support their case, they presented the jury with photos of Skylar's changing appearance and weight over time. The photos included images of her looking very thin, as well as photos showing her looking slightly heavier. Her attorney stated that Skylar held the baby for hours while she bled on the bathroom floor. Despite her critical condition, Skylar remained committed to providing comfort and care for her baby after suffering unimaginable pain. Skylar's attorneys said she decided to bury the baby in her backyard. They explained to the court that Skylar had originally planned to tell her family about her impending pregnancy but unfortunately did not have time to do so. Skylar's doctor informed her that she was due in 8 to 10 weeks. Therefore, Skylar thought she had enough time to attend prom and graduate from high school before talking to her mother. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby had died before birth. The doctor argued that since Skylar did not admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it was possible that it had been severed before or during the baby's birth. The doctor also argued that Skylar's description of the baby's appearance was significant because she stated that the baby was white, suggesting that the baby may have died before birth. The obstetrician contended that a healthy newborn baby is not always pink. In fact, in his experience, newborns often have a purplish skin tone. Additionally, the doctor noted that Skylar had only gained 15 pounds during her pregnancy. He suggested that this limited weight gain could be a sign of an eating disorder, which might have restricted the baby's growth in the womb. The doctor's testimony aimed to question the accuracy of what Skylar told the police about the baby's health. Skylar's defense argued that she had only told the police what she wanted to say during questioning. They also claimed that she had not witnessed or participated in any harm to the child. Their goal was to cast doubt on the credibility of Skylar's testimony and suggest that other factors may have contributed to the child's death. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted a week, and the jury then reached its final verdict. The verdict came quickly, after just 4 hours of deliberation. They acquitted Skylar of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, Skylar was convicted of abuse of a corpse, a serious crime punishable by up to a year in prison. Skylar was held in custody until sentencing. During her sentencing hearing, she apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of the incident. The judge criticized Skylar F. or her role in the tragic death of her child. The judge was certain that if Skylar had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive. He severely criticized her actions and expressed disappointment that her choices led to serious consequences, including the death of her child. The judge also emphasized that Skylar's decisions were directly responsible for the child's death. The 3-year probation sentence for corpse abuse that the judge imposed on Skylar also served as a warning that her actions were morally unacceptable and against the law. In November 2020, another judge agreed to reduce Skylar's probation to 2 years early at the request of her attorney. During the hearing, Skylar expressed her desire to return to a normal life and asserted that she no longer needed supervision. Recognizing Skylar's progress, the judge decided not to allocate any more probation resources to her case. The judge made it clear that probation is not meant to be a punishment or a form of rehabilitation, but rather to give an individual the opportunity to prove why they should not face prison time. Since her acquittal, Skylar has made the most of this opportunity. She has successfully completed 2 semesters of college and works part-time at the law firm that represented her. Despite her acquittal, Skylar has faced many difficulties in finding a part-time job. She has often been denied job opportunities due to her criminal history. However, that has not stopped her from pursuing her career goals. She has expressed a desire to attend law school and become a defense attorney, hoping to use her knowledge to help others overcome similar hardships. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lynette White. Lynette White was a beautiful young woman from Cardiff, Wales. Due to difficult circumstances, she had to support herself through prostitution since she was 14 years old. Although this was not Lynette's childhood dream, it was the path she was forced to choose. Before her murder, Lynette had given an interview to BBC Wales journalist Tim Rogers, who was investigating child prostitution. In this conversation, Lynette shared how she had been abused, taken to Bristol, and forced into prostitution. Although Lynette managed to return to Cardiff, she was still unable to escape this dangerous life. By 1988, when Lynette was 20 years old, she had become a well-known prostitute on the streets of Cardiff. With her beautiful appearance and high regard among her friends, Lynette was one of the top prostitutes in the city. She went to work every day, earning around £100 a night. People often thought that Lynette White was trying her best to make a better life, but the reality was quite different. She worked hard just to pay for her boyfriend Stephen Miller's cocaine addiction. Every day, Stephen took large amounts of money from Lynette, who was his only source of income. Lynette and Stephen lived together in a flat on Dorset Street, Cardiff. Every day, Stephen drove Lynette to work in Riverside, Cardiff, and then went to the North Star Club in the evening to collect her earnings. Lynette's life took a new turn when Leanne, a friend of Lynette's, lent her the keys to a flat. The purpose of this was for Lynette to take clients there for sex. On the evening of February 14, 1988, Leanne went to the flat as she presumably wanted to use it. However, when she got there, Leanne found the door locked, which was quite unusual. Leanne became very concerned about Lynette and went to Butte Town Police Station to report her missing. The police went with Leanne to her James Street flat. They entered the flat and found Lynette lying in a pool of her own blood. She had died from severe injuries. A post-mortem examination by forensic pathologist Bernard Knight revealed that Lynette had been stabbed more than 50 times in various parts of her body, including her chest, face, abdomen, wrists, arms, hands, and thighs. In particular, her throat had been brutally slashed from ear to ear. Although Lynette had been stabbed multiple times, her cause of death was the injury to her throat. The medical examiner determined that Lynette was murdered on February 14th. Between 1:45 a.m. and 4 a.m. Lynette's body was found between the foot of her bed and the window, covered in blood. An autopsy revealed that semen containing no sperm was found in Lynette's vagina and on her underwear. Additionally, 2 different blood types were found on Lynette, including her own blood and blood type AB, which was not Lynette's. After news of Lynette's death spread, police began to investigate the case further. Several witnesses reported seeing a distressed man in the area near where Lynette's body was found on James Street. The man looked suspicious and appeared to have blood on his hands. The suspicious man was described as a white man, about 5 feet 10 inches tall and in his mid-30s. Police focused their search on him and eventually arrested a man matching the description. However, he was released after providing an alibi. Police also investigated Stephen, Lynette's boyfriend, as the victim's partner is often the first suspect. Stephen was questioned but was later released because his blood type did not match the blood type found on Lynette. In addition, the police also investigated Francine Cordell and his mother because Lynette was scheduled to testify against Francine in court in an unrelated case. However, both were also ruled out as suspects because their blood did not match the AB blood type found on Lynette. With no leads, the police had to rely on statements collected from the house-to-house investigation. In particular, 2 people gave suspicious statements. They were Mark Gromick, who lived in the apartment above where Lynette was murdered, and his friend, Paul Atkins. In their testimonies, Mark and Paul gave 4 completely different statements. Therefore, the investigators did not take these statements seriously. The police collected more statements related to Lynette's murder. Ronnie Williams, a police informant, gave statements implicating his brother-in-law, Yusef Abdullahi. However, the strained relationship between Ronnie and Yusef led the police to doubt and dismiss this account. Leanne Vilde, who reported Lynette missing on the day of her death, was also a suspect. After intense questioning, she gave a drunken statement naming Stephen and Yusef as the killers. Another eyewitness, Violet Piriam, a secretary at the Cardiff Yacht Club, shed light on the case. 8 months into the investigation, she recalled a crucial detail. On February 14th, while driving home from the club at around 1:30 a.m., she saw 4 excited black men outside the building where Lynette was killed. 2 of them, in particular, she identified as John Acti and Rashid Omar. Piriam's testimony opened a new line of inquiry into the case. Angela Sila, who has a mild intellectual disability, gave a crucial testimony. She said she saw Stephen, John, Rashid, Ronnie Acti, John's cousin Tony Paris, and Tony Brace outside 7 James Street on the day Lynette was murdered. This testimony was important because it matched Violet's testimony and further implicated Yusef, John Stephen, and others. On the same day, Mark and Paul also provided new testimony. They said they saw a group of men, including Ronnie and Yusef. Angela Sila then gave another testimony in December 1988. She said she heard screams from Lynette's flat and ran there with Leanne. Leanne gave a similar testimony on the same day, saying she went to the flat after hearing Lynette's screams and met Stephen, Yusef, Ronnie Acti, Stephen's brother, and an unnamed mixed-race man. However, Angela Sila later got into trouble. She had type AB blood, and police found her blood on Lynette's socks. Sila later gave a new confession, admitting that she was part of the murder, along with Leanne and others. Leanne also admitted that she was forced to cut Lynette's wrists to ensure her complicity and silence. With no way out, Stephen confessed to killing Lynette after 307 denials. He also named other men involved, leading to the arrest of all those accused of the murder. Specifically, the police arrested Stephen Miller, Tony Stephen, Yusef Abdullahi, Ronnie Akhti, Rashid Omar, and Martin Tucker on December 7, 1988. 2 days later, John Akhti and Tony Paris were also arrested. After nearly a year in custody, their trial began on October 5, 1989 at Swansea Crown Court. It was the longest murder trial in British legal history, lasting 197 days. After 2 years in custody, Ronnie Akhti and John Akhti were acquitted of murder. Meanwhile, Tony Paris, Stephen Miller, and Yusef Abdullahi were convicted. Each was sentenced to life imprisonment and was known as the Cardiff Three. However, there was no forensic evidence linking the men to the crime scene, which created many doubts and questions about the verdict. Friends and family of the Cardiff Three began a campaign to overturn the verdict. The campaign received widespread support and was followed up by television documentaries in 1992. The Cardiff Three's appeal was finally accepted in December 1992. After hearing Stephen's interrogation, Judge Taylor decided that the police had been abusive in their questioning of Stephen. Therefore, the veracity of Stephen's testimony was no longer important. In the end, the Cardiff Three were acquitted. Their conviction was deemed unsafe and insufficiently supported. However, if the Cardiff Three were not the real criminals, then the real criminal is still at large. This raises the question, who killed Lynette White? 8 years later, the case was reopened. This time, Professor Dave Barkley and Police Chief Kevin O'Neill were assigned to investigate. The case led the police back to the crime scene, where the incident had occurred 12 years earlier. While reviewing old photos of the crime scene, Professor Barkley discovered a crucial detail that no one else had seen all these years: a large drop of blood that might have been splattered from a knife onto the wallpaper. When the crime occurred in 1988, the police had collected several pieces of wallpaper from the apartment as evidence. Upon searching through the old evidence, they discovered that the only missing piece of wallpaper was the one containing the large drop of blood. The forensic team continued to investigate the case, carefully studying photos of the scene. They discovered that the blood might have been hidden under several layers of paint on the baseboards. The team also found traces of blood on a piece of cellophane from a cigarette packet, leading to the suspect being nicknamed Cellophane Man. To find the suspect, the forensic team led by Angela Gallup began collecting and comparing DNA data. However, searching for a matching DNA profile in 140 police databases proved futile as no matches were found. But the forensic team did not give up. They narrowed down the search to hundreds of profiles in the Cardiff area by comparing similar DNA profiles. They eventually found a match between the suspect's DNA profile and that of a 14-year-old boy who was known to the police for driving around Cardiff. Surprisingly, the boy could not be a suspect because he had not been born at the time of the crime 15 years ago. The police still visited the boy's home to investigate. There, they were told that the boy's father had died but that he had an uncle named Jeffrey Gafford. On February 26, 2003, detectives went to Jeffrey's home in the village of Hanharan, 15 miles west of Cardiff. However, Jeffrey's house was empty at the time. The next morning, police went to his workplace in an office building in Cardiff city centre. When they explained the purpose of their visit, Jeffrey said, "I think you've got someone for the job." Jeffrey was then asked to provide a mouth swab, which he agreed to do. The police immediately analyzed the swab and identified a clue that would lead to the murderer. The next morning, Superintendent Kevin O'Neill wanted to get things right so there would be no more mistakes. He assigned a team to watch Jeffrey before he began interviewing him. Chief O'Neill had planned to monitor Jeffrey for a week, but on February 28, 2003, Jeffrey attempted suicide. When the surveillance team caught him in a garage where he had bought 3 packets of paracetamol, the police immediately took action. When the police arrived at Jeffrey's home, he had taken approximately 62 paracetamol tablets, a significant amount of painkillers. Despite this, Jeffrey tried to hide his actions. When questioned, he made a horrifying confession: "I killed Lynette White. I've been waiting for this for 15 years. I think I deserve this sentence. I really hope to die." Jeffrey was then taken to the hospital, where he once again confessed to the murder he had committed 15 years earlier. Initially refusing treatment, Jeffrey prepared himself to accept death. But he eventually agreed to take the antidote and recovered within a few days. On July 4, 2003, Jeffrey pleaded guilty to the murder of Lynette White in court. Judge Royce sentenced Jeffrey to life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years and 8 months. Jeffrey's lawyer later revealed that Jeffrey had killed Lynette for over 30 pounds and had sexually assaulted her body. In February 2007, Paul Atkins, Angela Sila, Leanne Vilde, and Mark Gromick were charged with perjury. By December 2008, 3 of them, Angela Sila, Leanne Vilde, and Mark Gromick, were convicted and each sentenced to 18 months in prison. However, Paul Atkins was acquitted because it was believed he had been bullied, threatened, abused, and manipulated into making false statements. In March 2009, it was announced that the prosecution had enough evidence to charge the officers involved in the original investigation for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. However, in 2011, the trial was dropped due to a lack of evidence. In 2015, 8 of the accused officers brought a civil suit in the High Court against the police force, suing for malicious prosecution, unlawful detention, and wrongful conduct. However, in late 2015, the judge in the civil case dismissed their case. 5 of the wrongfully accused men were awarded compensation after their release. Stephen Miller was paid £571,000, John Actie received £300,000, while Tony Perez was awarded £250,000. 2 other men, Ron Actie and Yusuf Abdullahi, have since died. Ronnie Actie died in 2007 after struggling to come to terms with what had happened to him. Yusuf Abdullahi died in 2011 from cancer after battling post-traumatic stress disorder. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Davis. Lucy Davis was born in 1971 in the picturesque town of Penimprid, Wales. Her childhood was filled with love and warmth, thanks to her parents, Roger and Andre, who created a happy and comfortable home. Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glenk with her younger sister, Anna. Lucy took her first steps surrounded by majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her kind nature and charming smile make her stand out, becoming a dynamic and special individual among those around her. Lucy easily gained the sympathy of her teachers and classmates. She developed a passion for horseback riding at a young age and had an endless love for horses. Seeing how eager Lucy was, her father arranged for her and her younger sister to take horse riding lessons with experienced instructors. They mastered the basics of this noble art, conquering challenges and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became skilled horse riders. Lucy Davis had a wonderful childhood in Wales, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the love of family and community, which helped her grow and develop. Lucy and Anna developed a passion for horse riding, which not only brought them companions but also taught them valuable life skills such as discipline, self-control, and responsibility. Their talent and perseverance earned them recognition at prestigious competitions, where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's interests extended beyond horse riding. With a curious mind and a desire for knowledge, Lucy explored other passions, including music. She took flute and piano lessons, diligently honing her skills, and within a year, she had mastered both instruments, captivating audiences with her performances. This led to her joining the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where she continued to refine her musical talents. Lucy also participates in the school choir, which allows her to express her creativity and love of music. Lucy Davis's childhood was a balance of fun and dedication, marked by hard work and eager to learn. These qualities formed a strong base that would support her future successes and help her become an extraordinary person. In high school, Lucy became close friends with Garrick Jenkinson, a quiet and enigmatic young man from Wales. Despite not knowing much about his background, but they developed a strong and lasting connection. Garrett and Lucy became closer friends as time passed. However, Garrett secretly harbored romantic feelings for Lucy. After graduating from high school in 1998, Lucy pursued her passion for music and enrolled at the University of Yorkshire in Northern England. She initially aspired to become a music teacher, but later realized her true desire was to create art in a major city. This realization led Lucy to meet Grimmy McAllister, whose perspective and humor aligned with hers. As their connection grew, Lucy introduced Grimmy to her parents, Roger and Andre. The introduction was a success, and Lucy's parents saw Grimmy as an ideal partner for their daughter. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimmy chose to live together and start a family. In 1995, while in college, the couple had a son named James and Anne. To care for their child, Lucy took a break from her studies, while Grimmy continued his education and worked night shifts at the postal sorting department to support their family. Despite the challenges she faced, Lucy was hopeful about their future, driven by her love for her family and her aspirations for a better life. However, spending months at home with the baby took a toll on her, and she began to feel lonely. The fact that she and Grimmy rarely spent time together, due to his night shifts, made the problem even worse. Seeking companionship and someone to talk to, Lucy created a social media account under the nickname Miseria. This virtual outlet allowed her to share her experiences and connect with others. One user in particular caught her attention, Harold Landry, a 53 years old, he from Louisiana who had grown up in poverty and was fixated on achieving independence and success. Harold put in a lot of work and eventually came to an important insight. He understood that real wealth came not from owning oil wells, but from providing the essential tools and machinery needed to keep them running. With this insight, he founded a company that specializes in manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As his business thrived, Harold's fortunes grew, earning him not only financial security but also prestige and, eventually, the status of a billionaire. For Lucy, conversing with Harold was invigorating. She was captivated by his life experiences, dedication, and generosity. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. The significant gaps in their age, social standing, and lifestyle often caused friction between them. When Harold and Lucy first met, Harold's life seemed to be a confusing combination of luxury in many different experiences. He indulged in unusual hobbies, acquired luxury items, and owned real estate on KML Island in Mexico. There is no information about his previous marriages. He was married and divorced twice, but it is not known whether he had children from these marriages. Harold's life underwent a major transformation in 1992. Following his second divorce, he met Geraldine, a woman 20 years his junior, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico. At the time, Geraldine was married to Chris Price and had 2 children. Despite Geraldine being married, but Harold successfully captured her heart. On February 6, 1994, Harold planned a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They employed Christian Hurton as a babysitter for their children, giving them the opportunity to enjoy a romantic evening by themselves, free from childcare responsibilities. After dinner, Harold walked Geraldine home and then offered to drive Christian home as a thank you. Unbeknownst to Harold, Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been monitoring the couple's secret affair. Chris, who was watching from his car, decided to confront Harold. He chased after him, finally catching up at a red light. Chris rushed towards Harold, shouting accusations. Harold remained calm, pulled out a gun, and warned Chris to back off. Enraged, Chris dared Harold to shoot. Without hesitation, Harold fired, hitting Chris in the neck. Fortunately, Chris received prompt medical treatment from a nearby hospital, and which saved his life. In 1997, Harold was tried in St. Mary Parish Court for the attempted murder of Chris Price. His lawyer, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold was a victim of a setup. The jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after appealing, Harold was released on parole, required to pay a fine and perform community service. Harold was thankful to Pete for his assistance, and they formed a friendship. Harold and Chris reached a settlement, but the details of the compensation were kept private. Harold then lived in Covington as a wealthy man, openly discussing his past with Lucy, including his previous failed marriages and a traumatic incident. Lucy became more attracted to Harold after he shared his secrets. She was captivated by his persuasive nature. After Lucy ended her relationship with Grimmy, she and Harold chose to start dating. To shield them from unwanted issues, Harold aimed to steer clear of trouble. In early 2000, Harold visited England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre. Although they were initially surprised by the age gap, they supported their daughter's decision and didn't meddle in the relationship. Harold gave Lucy many costly presents because he wanted to fulfill all her wishes. His love was intense, and he contemplated marriage, but wanted everything to be flawless. Harold plans a trip to Mexico to strengthen his relationship, inviting Lucy, her son James, and her ex-husband Grimmy to join them on this special journey. Mexico was a paradise for Harold, and having his friend and lawyer Pete's apartment nearby added to the trip's comfort. Harold had recently bought a diamond engagement ring and shared the news with Pete. However, Pete suspected Lucy was cheating on Harold due to her frequent meetings with Grimmy. Despite Pete's warnings, Harold proposed to Lucy, blinded by his love for her. She accepted his proposal. In mid-2003, Harold and Lucy got married. Harold purchased a $1 million home in Warshire County, and they started a new life together. Their neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, were friendly and helped them feel welcome in the area. After the wedding, Lucy gave birth to a daughter named Hearth. Harold also welcomed James, Lucy's son from her previous marriage, into their family and treated him as his own. Over time, Lucy and Harold's relationship began to deteriorate. Harold became increasingly controlling, expecting Lucy to obey him completely. However, Lucy was an independent person and refused to comply with Harold's demands. As a result, arguments and disagreements became more frequent, creating a tense atmosphere at home. Their son, James, had a difficult and unhappy childhood due to his family's stressful environment. Lucy and Harold's relationship was deteriorating, and their neighbors took notice. The situation was made worse by their growing reliance on alcohol, which added to their existing problems. However, when the arguing and shouting stopped, neighbors thought the couple was trying to resolve their issues. In 2009, Lucy reconnected with her old school friend Garrett on social media. Their online conversations became a source of comfort for Lucy during a difficult time in her life. As Harold sensed Lucy's growing distance, he realized she was seeking solace in another man. Not wanting to confront the situation, Harold left for Mexico, leaving Lucy alone. During his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit. Harold was surprised when he got home. Shortly after, Lucy filed for divorce. And Harold began an affair with their neighbor, Rachel. Harold and Lucy's divorce proceedings were complicated by disagreements over dividing their assets. Lucy wanted to keep the family home for the sake of their children, while Harold was adamant that they sell it and offered her a financial settlement instead. The situation between Lucy and Harold became increasingly heated, and Lucy revealed some of Harold's past secrets. When Lucy returns home, the arguments continue, and the tension between her and Harold causes Jameson and Harth much suffering. On the evening of Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold was drinking wine when a package intended for his neighbor, Stephen Kennedy, was mistakenly delivered to his address. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen stopped by Harold's house to collect his package after noticing the delivery notification. Upon arriving, Stephen was greeted by Harold, then Harold offered him a glass of wine. Although Harold had already been drinking and was visibly intoxicated, Stephen accepted the offer. After a brief visit, during which he collected his package and exchanged greetings with Lucy, and Stephen left. Harold and Lucy's argument soon resumed, this time centering on Lucy's plans to buy furniture for her new home. James rushed into the kitchen after hearing a commotion and witnessed Harold physically abusing his mother with a kitchen utensil. James immediately called the police and comforted his younger sister. Meanwhile, Lucy grabbed the children and attempted to escape the house, heading to Stephen's residence in search of help. However, Harold caught up with her during the escape and violently attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. He then dragged her body under a nearby bush, attempting to conceal the crime. Upon hearing the screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered Lucy's lifeless body. Initially, he thought she had fainted, but soon realized the gravity of the situation. Police officer Steve C. Fox arrived at the crime scene and immediately called for an ambulance. He then began searching the neighborhood for Harold, but unfortunately, he was unable to find Harold. The children, traumatized and frightened, hid in the house until the police arrived. A tragic incident drastically altered the family's life, leading to a prolonged and challenging struggle for justice. An ambulance quickly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but unfortunately, she succumbed after to the hospital. At the same time, a fearful Harold knocked on his friend Rachel's door, his voice shaking. He confessed to doing something terrible, but didn't reveal what it was. Harold then gave Rachel a large sum of money, $40,000, along with all his cash, car keys, and paychecks. After that, he headed home. Meanwhile, the police were searching for Harold. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but he seemed to have vanished. However, luck eventually turned in the detectives' favor, and Harold was arrested on his way back from Rachel's house. His face, filled with fear and remorse, was telling. Lucy's family, including her parents Roger and Andre, were overcome with grief. In a statement to the press, they expressed their profound sorrow at the loss of their daughter and chose not to make any additional comments. The forensic examination confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. The investigation relied heavily on evidence discovered at the crime scene and a key eyewitness account from James, Lucy's son, who saw the tragic event unfold. February 24, 2011, was a day of tension in the courtroom, as everyone waited anxiously for the verdict in the trial of 64-year-old Harold Landry, who was accused of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy. The jury had just delivered their guilty verdict, and the air was thick with bitterness and loss. Harold should have been Lucy's rock and protector, stood accused of her murder. His lawyer and friend, Pete, had passed the case to experienced attorney Andy Child, who faced an uphill battle in defending Harold. The defense's task was to convince the court that Harold never intended to take Lucy's life. The defense claimed that Harold acted in response to Lucy's aggressive behavior. Overcome with emotion, Harold swore he loved his wife and was consumed by remorse, insisting he never meant to hurt her. As part of his defense strategy, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection with Lucy's death. However, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including disturbing photographs of multiple wounds on Lucy's body. The brutality of Harold's attack left no doubt about his guilt. After a thorough review of the evidence, the court delivered its verdict. Harold Landry was found guilty of Lucy's death and sentenced to life in prison. He must serve 16 years before being eligible for parole, at which point he will be 82 years old. The story of Harold and Lucy is a tragic love story. Although the trial is over, the consequences of this tragedy still linger. Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, felt that the verdict was fair, but it did not alleviate their grief. Meanwhile, Harold Landry maintained his innocence and vowed to appeal the decision. He claimed that he would not change anything, even with the benefit of hindsight. Harold has been held accountable for his actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was born in 1980 in Toronto into a large and close-knit family. There were 5 children in the family, and Brett was the second. He had 2 older brothers, Christopher and Leland, and a younger brother, AJ. Brett's parents always tried to instill the right values in their children by promoting a healthy lifestyle. Brett's father worked at a newspaper and was also a fitness trainer. His mother dedicated herself to homemaking and loved growing flowers. Brett's mother could be strict and harsh in raising her 4 sons, while his father was gentle and reserved. Each son in the family pursued his own path. After graduating from high school, Brett enrolled at the University of Toronto. However, he quickly struggled with his studies. After 2 painful breakups, Brett could not concentrate on his studies and eventually decided to drop out of university. Brett felt jealous as he watched his friends and classmates build relationships, get married, and achieve success in life. Meanwhile, he felt like he was not accomplishing anything significant, which made him feel like a failure. After getting a job as a painter, he realized that this career was not suitable for him. At the same time, Brett was concerned about his appearance, spending a lot of money on personal needs and on girls. As a result, he accumulated a large debt of up to 60,000 Canadian dollars, which he had no way to repay. When creditors started demanding money, Brett fell into a deep depression. He felt like a complete failure but did not dare to confess his problems to anyone. In desperation, Brett was determined to find a way out of his difficult situation and make a large sum of money quickly. He decided to rob a bank. On October 20, 2007, he put his plan into action. He chose a bank near his home and created a disguise by covering his face with bandages, pretending to have an injured left arm, limping, and carrying a stack of papers. Brett robbed his first bank by pretending to be sick. He entered and approached the cash register. There, he handed over a note demanding cash and warned the clerk that he was hiding a weapon. Out of fear, the clerk quickly gave Brett the money in the cash register. The amount was only about $1,000, which Brett was not happy about, but he decided not to attract any more attention. So he took the money and left the scene. Brett was caught on security cameras during the robbery. Despite this, he was not caught initially because he avoided using the same technique and changed his disguise each time. Instead of using fake bandages to look like a sick person, he wore a fake beard and hat to hide his identity. His next bank robberies achieved different results. Throughout his 12 bank robberies, Brett accumulated more than $28,000 in cash. He was always evasive, trying to avoid the police. Finally, on June 20, 2008, the police identified Brett, and he was arrested during his 13th attempted robbery. This surprised everyone because Brett had previously volunteered at a children's hospital and was now a robber. Brett was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During his sentence, experts conducted psychological evaluations and concluded that he showed no signs of aggression or violence. Additionally, Brett did not use illegal substances and did not suffer from mental disorders during his sentence. After 2 years, Brett was paroled for good behavior. The prison staff were impressed with him because he was a pleasant, charismatic, and hardworking young man. They felt that he had only made one serious mistake due to the pressure of debt and deserved the second chance. Brett's record showed that he was a model prisoner with a low risk of reoffending. Upon his release, Brett was required to attend a course of psychotherapy and report any problems he encountered in his family relationships or at work. This helped him avoid reoffending. However, the reality turned out to be much more complicated than Brett had anticipated. The debts were still outstanding, and he could not pay them off. Finding a job was also difficult because no one wanted to hire an ex-convict, even though he had skills in painting. In desperation, Brett declared bankruptcy. Fortunately, his parents supported him financially, allowing him to continue his studies at university, this time in information technology. Brett also continued to see a psychologist under court order and tried to stabilize his life. During therapy, Brett was advised to be more open and honest with the people around him. In September 2011, a friend of Brett's arranged a blind date with a girl named Kristen Baxter. Kristen was a physical therapist, lived alone in an apartment, and had a small dog. She also loved to travel. When Brett met Kristen, they immediately had a special connection. They quickly found they were compatible and attracted to each other. They both loved animals and traveling, which created a bond between them. Not long after, Brett and Kristen began a romantic relationship. Brett and Kristen spent a lot of time together, attending sporting events and hiking. They also went on a vacation together in the Bahamas with Kristen's family. Kristen's dog immediately took a liking to Brett, which made a good impression. Brett's life seemed to be back on track, and he no longer exhibited suspicious behavior. He longed for a quiet and cozy life with his beloved girlfriend. When Brett moved into Kristen's apartment in January 2013, their relationship entered a new phase. They began thinking about getting married. However, Brett was hiding a truth from Kristen. In reality, he was not the person she thought he was. While Brett's brothers were building their careers and becoming independent, he was just studying and living off his parents' money. He hid his real life and focused only on enjoying the vibrant city life with Kristen. They enjoyed going to cozy restaurants and swimming in the pool at night, but Brett never revealed the truth about his circumstances. Brett and Kristen often traveled to warm countries. However, their lives were turned upside down when Brett's father suddenly passed away. Brett moved in with his mother to help with the funeral arrangements and support her during this difficult time. During this period, Brett confessed to his mother, Susan, that he loved Kristen very much and dreamed of marrying her. However, he did not have enough money to buy a decent engagement ring, so he hesitated to propose. Brett's mother was touched by her son's words and gave him money to buy an expensive ring. With a luxurious diamond ring, Brett proposed to Kristen, and she accepted. The couple began to prepare for their wedding. However, Brett still had many worries about the future. He didn't know how he would support his family. He also had legal issues, bankruptcy, and debt that he hadn't disclosed to Kristen. To address these issues, Brett decided to focus on finding a decent, stable job. In early 2016, Brett finally found a good job in the IT field. He was very happy to share this news with Kristen, and they decided to celebrate with their families. However, everything changed when his new employer learned about his criminal past and fired him immediately. This took a serious toll on Brett's self-esteem. To avoid upsetting Kristen, Brett decided not to tell her about this failure. Instead, he lied and said that he would work remotely from home. Every day, when Kristen went to work, Brett would pretend to work on the computer. Kristen was very happy, thinking that Brett would start earning a lot of money and they would be able to stand on their own. Kristen started preparing for the wedding scheduled for September 16, 2016. She chose the most beautiful and expensive options they could afford. A luxurious banquet hall was booked for the ceremony, and the bachelor party before the wedding was to be held at a luxurious ski resort. The couple even started looking for a spacious and cozy house to settle down in after the wedding, as they were tired of living in a small apartment. Susan was extremely happy, thinking that her son was independent, had graduated from college, and had a high-paying job. She looked forward to the day when her son would get married and move into his own house. But the reality was completely the opposite. Brett had lied about all of this. He was trapped in his own fabricated thoughts and could not get out. In an effort to earn money, Brett took on any side job he could and even helped his mother with housework to earn money. He went to see his mother every day, looking for things to do and fixing things to get paid. Susan became suspicious when she saw her son hanging around the house all day, constantly doing this and that instead of going to work. If Brett made as much money as he claimed, why did he need these odd jobs? Susan began to ask her son difficult questions, which Brett initially tried to avoid. But then he remembered his therapist's advice about the importance of honesty, and finally dared to confess his troubles to his mother. He begged his mother for significant financial support, promising to continue looking for work. However, his mother was extremely disappointed and angry when she learned the truth. She refused to give him any money and threatened to tell Kristen everything. Brett was extremely angry at his mother's harsh words, and he feared that Kristen would leave him if she found out the truth. Brett was desperate because he didn't want to lose his girlfriend and have to move back in with his mother. He feared that if that happened, he would feel like a loser for the rest of his life. So he decided to carry out a strange plan. Unable to legally purchase a gun due to his criminal record, Brett chose to purchase a crossbow to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. He purchased the old crossbow with cash. The next day, Brett returned to his mother's house under the pretext of helping with home repairs to earn money. However, he had other intentions. On August 25, 2016, his mother, Kristen, woke up early as usual and went to work. Meanwhile, Brett stayed home and pretended to work. In reality, he was preparing for another act. To avoid suspicion, Brett created a keystroke automaton on his computer to give the impression that he was working. He also set up an automatic email function to send at a specific time to create an alibi. Next, Brett gathered all the necessary items for his disguise into a gym bag, including clothes and a wig. To avoid being caught on surveillance cameras, he sneaked out of the house through the fire escape and went to Susan's house incognito, wearing clothes and a wig so that no one would recognize him. However, when he reached the door, he took off all his disguises and went inside. Once inside, Brett tried to convince his mother to give him money. But Susan continued to refuse. A fierce argument broke out between them, with Susan demanding that Brett confess his lie to Kristen. Otherwise, she would expose him herself. As the argument became more heated, Susan sensed something was wrong. She took advantage of the moment when Brett stepped outside and called her eldest son, Chris. She begged Chris to come and help resolve the conflict with Brett. Brett returned to the garage for an important reason. He had hidden a crossbow there earlier. Once he found the weapon, he began to prepare everything for the shot. However, this required more time and effort than he had imagined. At that moment, his mother entered the garage in a rage. Brett quickly found a nearby tool and struck her twice, hitting her in the cheek and ear. She screamed in pain and shock at the sight of her own son attacking her. A fight broke out between them. During the scuffle, both fell to the floor and rolled around, knocking over everything in their path. In the chaos, Brett found a long, dirty rag, and without thinking much, he used it to strangle her. Only after carrying out this act did Brett realize that things had gone terribly wrong. His original murder plan had turned into a nightmare. He remembered that his brother Chris, who had been called by their mother, was about to arrive at the garage. Brett decided to remove his brother from the list of potential witnesses. He jumped up, grabbed the crossbow, and started preparing. A plan to kill Chris formed in Brett's mind. After preparing everything for the new crime, Brett hid in the garage, waiting for Chris. Soon, Chris entered the garage to find their mother, not knowing that he was in danger. Brett quietly approached Chris from behind and shot him in the back of the head. Chris fell immediately. Brett dragged his body close to their mother's and covered it with a tarp. Brett quickly changed his clothes and prepared to run away. However, he did not expect that his younger brother, AJ, was visiting and appeared at the door. For Brett, this was a disastrous situation. Brett began to consider his next move: run away after changing his clothes or stay and kill AJ. He feared that when his brother discovered the bodies, AJ would immediately call the police and he would be arrested. This fear drove Brett to commit another murder. After finding AJ, Brett followed him. Brett approached AJ with the intention of shooting him in the back of the head, just as he had done to Chris. However, this time things did not go as planned. AJ sensed danger and noticed that Brett was carrying a weapon. A scuffle broke out between the two brothers. During the fight, Brett attempted to injure AJ by shooting him in the neck with the crossbow. AJ screamed in pain and fled. He ran out of the house, leaving a trail of blood in the sand, and eventually collapsed from exhaustion in the driveway. It was then that Brett learned that there was another brother sleeping in the house, Leland, 39. He was awakened by AJ's terrified screams. Leland looked out the window and saw his brother covered in blood on the road. Panicked, he rushed to the phone to call 911 but couldn't make it. At that moment, Brett rushed at him in a frenzy. Leland and Brett started a fierce fight, spreading throughout the house and turning it into a bloody mess. Taking advantage of Brett's distraction, Leland sneaked out without being detected. He crawled to the neighbor's house and passed out right in front of it. The kind neighbors immediately called the police. Meanwhile, Brett angrily ran back to the yard and saw AJ, injured, trying to crawl away. Obsessed with the desire to kill his brother, Brett chased after AJ before the neighbors discovered him. However, while chasing AJ, Brett was surprised to find that Leland had told the neighbors everything. From that moment on, Brett had no chance to save himself. The police were about to arrive at the crime scene and put an end to his bloody journey. Brett's murder plan had failed. In desperation, Brett decided to surrender and returned to the house. There, he sat on the porch, holding a bottle of water, and waited for the police to arrive. When the police and ambulance arrived, paramedics confirmed that their mother and Chris had passed away. AJ still had signs of life, but his condition was critical. However, on the way to the hospital, AJ passed away due to his injuries. Leland, despite his serious injuries, survived. He was taken to the hospital for treatment and medical attention and gradually began to recover. Meanwhile, Brett was arrested at the scene of the crime and faced serious charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder of his brother. The news left Kristen reeling, especially since their wedding was only 3 weeks away. Kristen was devastated when she learned the truth about her lover. Brett's criminal past, including a robbery conviction, financial hardship, unemployment, and the horrific murder of his family, left her in disbelief. She wondered how she could have lived with this man all this time without knowing the truth. Kristen immediately called off the wedding and returned to her apartment. There, she discovered a strange device that Brett had made to create an alibi. Mistaking it for an explosive device, she panicked and called the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene, evacuated the residents of the building, and began to carefully examine the mysterious device. After a short time, they discovered that the device was just a clever invention of Brett's. Although initially concerned about the danger, The police later realized that the device was harmless. However, they were impressed by Brett's extraordinary ingenuity and care. His intelligence and inner strength were undeniable, but unfortunately, he used them for the wrong purpose. At trial, Brett pleaded guilty and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted that his actions constituted second-degree murder and hoped for a lighter sentence. Brett explained that he only intended to use the crossbow to scare his mother and have a serious talk with her. He wanted his mother to finally understand and support him, but things got out of hand. Brett claimed that he had no intention of hurting his brothers. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prosecution believed that the defendant had planned to harm his mother from the beginning, not just stop at a conversation. They argued that Brett had brought the crossbow with the intention of killing Susan and should be held strictly responsible. As a result, he was convicted of first-degree murder of his mother and second-degree murder of his brother. The court handed down harsh sentences, 3 life terms with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In addition, Brett was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the attempted murder of his brother Leland. All sentences were to run concurrently, meaning he could only apply for early release after a quarter of a century. Brett's only surviving brother, Leland, received the sentence with relief. Despite the pain and bitterness of the loss, Leland truly respected Brett's remorse. In Leland's mind, his brother was not a bad person at heart but had lost his way in life. Brett had taken the path of deceit and was eventually mired in the quagmire of his own lies. He could no longer get out, which led to a terrible tragedy. Brett Ryan's terrifying story serves as a warning to us all. It demonstrates that small lies and the concealment of truth can lead to dire consequences. When we continue to lie, the lies grow and accumulate, becoming unmanageable. As a result, not only is the liar's life ruined, but so are the lives of their loved ones. Brett Ryan had the opportunity to change after his first prison sentence. He had the support of his girlfriend and a loving family, and he could have gone to school and found a job. However, he chose to lie, leading to a disastrous outcome and ruining more than one life. Whether Brett truly admitted his mistake or just wanted a lighter sentence is not as important as the lessons he learns while serving his life sentence. Can he look back on his life, reflect on his mistakes, and strive to become a better version of himself? Only Brett knows the answer. However, his story certainly makes us reflect on our own actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Ardith Wood. Ardith Wood, a 27-year-old woman, is a beautiful and extremely intelligent girl. She was a PhD candidate in philosophy at Waterloo University and worked as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardith is about to achieve his long-held dream of becoming a professor. In the summer of 2003, Ardith visited her family in Ottawa, Canada. She spends time happily with her loved ones, going for walks and cooking together. On August 6th, Ardith went for a morning jog. When she returned home, she found her parents had thoughtfully prepared a delicious breakfast for her. With the warm weather, Ardith decided to borrow her brother's bike and go for a ride. She promised to return in a couple of hours. Her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, expecting Ardith to be back by then. Ardith cycled on a trail that wound through the forest, along the river, and past cliffs. The route was usually peaceful and safe, but on this day, something very bad happened. Ardith failed to return home, leaving her mother worried. A heavy downpour began, adding to the concern. The woman realized her daughter wouldn't be riding her bike in the bad weather, but as time passed and Ardith didn't return, the family began to search for her. They thought she might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Since the city has many bike paths, they weren't sure which one she chose. They had to search the entire town. Despite their efforts, they found nothing, and when night fell, they went to the police station. The bad weather forced them to postpone the search until the next morning. The next day there was still no news of Ardith, prompting police to launch the largest search operation in Ottawa history. The massive search operation involved around 1,000 people, including rescue teams, police officers, dog handlers and trained dogs, helicopters, and a large number of volunteers. Ardith's family joined the search, putting up posters with her photo all over the city. However, the first few days showed no progress. The police then asked the public for help. Before long, a local resident called in, saying that on the day Ardith disappeared, she was on the bike path in the forest and saw a suspicious man with a bicycle. A young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed but acting suspiciously, was described by the witness. His behavior was frightening, as he had attempted to push a girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, others arrived on the scene, and the perpetrator fell behind, allowing the girl to escape quickly. Following this incident, the girl no longer felt safe walking or cycling alone. The incident occurred in a Green Creek area, and she suspected the stranger may have also attacked Ardith. The witness was asked to create a composite sketch at the police station. The suspect was described as a light-skinned, dark-haired young man with a beard and glasses, aged 20 to 30 years old. He was athletically built. However, when the sketch was shown to Ardith's family, they did not recognize anyone familiar to Ardith. The sketch's features, such as glasses and a beard, were common at the time, making it difficult to pinpoint a specific individual. The investigators decided not to share Ardith's picture with the media, as they were concerned it would trigger a flood of misleading tips. Instead, police showed her photo to local residents. Believing someone must have seen her due to her striking appearance, they believed it was likely that a witness had seen her and could offer a valuable clue. Their assumption proved correct when 16-year-old Laura called the police. Laura said she saw Ardith on the bike trail on the same day that Ardith went missing. Laura was riding her bicycle and noticed Ardith sitting on a rock, appearing to rest. As Laura continued on, she heard a scream and turned to see Ardith arguing with a man. Laura was unsure what to make of the situation, thinking it might be a lover's quarrel. Ardith didn't seem to be calling for help, and Ardith eventually followed the man into the woods. Laura wanted to know what was happening but was scared by an approaching storm, and she quickly rode home. As Laura was leaving, she thought she heard a scream. The police asked her to come to the station to look at a composite sketch of a suspect. She recognized the person in the sketch. According to Laura, the incident occurred around 10 p.m. at Green Creek. After that, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered the same creepy guy on the trail. He had attacked them, but they were lucky enough to escape. There was one particular call from one woman that was especially noteworthy. She described how an attractive stranger approached her while she was walking. They had a pleasant conversation at first, but then his behavior changed drastically. The man started grabbing her, but the woman was able to push him away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't look back, fearing he would catch up to her. When she got home, she told her family about the incident and warned them to stay away from that area. Strangely, none of the girls who were attacked had reported the incidents to the police. The search for the suspect focused on the creek area. Soon, the police found Ardith's bicycle, which suggested they were on the right track. Meanwhile, investigators received an anonymous call that would prove to be a crucial breakthrough in the case. He reveals that a terrible incident happened in the forest, and alarmingly, he was involved in it. He said he didn't mean to hurt or kill anyone, but when he panicked, he hid the body. The man explained that he moved Ardith over a creek, made a shallow hole, and put her in it, hiding the spot with branches. Then, he quickly hung up the phone. The police were able to locate the source of the call, which was a phone booth situated 20 minutes away from Ottawa. The police quickly arrived, looking for witnesses or collecting evidence such as fingerprints or DNA from the anonymous caller. However, upon arrival, they were met with disappointment. The handset had been thoroughly wiped clean, and no eyewitnesses or surveillance cameras were found. The search for Ardath continued in Green Creek with the aid of specially trained dogs that could detect the scent of human remains. With the assistance of the dogs, the investigators located Ardath's grave, situated between two trees in a secluded, picturesque area. As the detective approached, they saw the partially buried, naked body of Ardath. Perhaps the criminal panicked after being seen by someone, leading to a hasty burial of Ardath. Upon examining the crime scene, criminologists found no fingerprints or DNA evidence. Medical examiners confirmed the cause of death as drowning, with algae present in Ardath's lungs, indicating she was alive when submerged in water. Despite the body being discovered naked, there were no definitive signs of rape, although the possibility was not ruled out. The police suspected the crime was sexually motivated, as the perpetrator targeted girls in secluded areas. Detectives were concerned that the suspect might commit again crime, so they had to quickly find and arrest him. The police thought the perpetrator had already assaulted several girls and killed Ardath, so they were determined to stop them from hurting anyone else. To expedite the investigation, authorities released a composite sketch of the suspect to the media, soliciting public assistance in identifying the individual. The response yielded approximately 4,000 leads, which investigators meticulously processed, a time-consuming task. A pivotal development emerged on September 10th, when police disclosed that the suspect had a distinctive eagle tattoo on his left shoulder, as reported by the girls who encountered him in the forest. A crucial lead emerged that could potentially track down the perpetrator. The media released a sketch of the tattoo, leading to several calls to the police from individuals reporting acquaintances with bird tattoos on various body parts. Unfortunately, these tips didn't yield any concrete results. However, in April 2004, investigators stumbled upon a significant clue while processing another batch of calls. A man claimed to know the killer, stating that the individual lived in the area and was seen riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity around the time of the crime. Intrigued, detectives invited he for questioning. Upon arriving at the police station, investigators were astonished to find that the individual matched the perpetrator's description in both appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man displayed visible nervousness, stating that he frequently rode his bike along the trail without understanding the issue at hand. When asked to reveal his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was discovered, sparking further interest from the authorities. The investigation revealed that the man had a prior history of run-ins with the law, making him the prime suspect. During the 3-hour interrogation, he responded to questions with hostility and aggression. At one point, he described himself as unpredictable, like a scorpion under a rock. Despite lacking an alibi for the day of Ardath's disappearance, he denied any involvement in her murder. However, due to insufficient evidence, the suspect was released, but the police kept him under surveillance. Weeks later, he was brought in for questioning again. This time, the detectives were better prepared, having gathered more information about him. They also suggested he take a polygraph test, which he agreed to and surprisingly passed. Consequently, the police were left with no alternative but to dismiss the suspicions against him. With the investigation stalled, the Ottawa police offered a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case, the largest reward ever offered in similar circumstances. The response was extremely strong, with approximately 5,000 calls received, each providing a potential lead for the police to investigate. The investigator became interested in a tip about Christopher Myers, a 25-year-old janitor who had previously been convicted of selling illegal substances. Colleagues described Christopher as quiet and non-confrontational, with a face that closely resembled the composite sketch of the suspect, including a similar beard. Initially, the police were thrilled, thinking they had found the right man. However, they were wrong. Christopher had an alibi for the day of Ardath's disappearance. His landlord stated that on August 6, 2003, Christopher was at home in the morning, then he heading to his job at a restaurant. This revelation puzzled the police, as they wondered how the landlord could recall the details of that day so clearly a year later. Another discrepancy emerged. Christopher did not have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder, despite witnesses claiming to have seen one. The detectives considered the possibility that he had removed the tattoo and remained convinced that Christopher was the suspect they were looking for. They were determined to prove it. A few weeks after Ardath's incident, a similar attack took place in the evening. A girl who bore a striking resemblance to Ardath was walking alone across a bridge when she noticed someone following her. Upon turning around, she saw an attractive man approaching on a bicycle. The girl made it clear she wasn't interested in talking and asked to be left alone. The man initially rode past her, but then turned his bicycle around and charged at her. With no one nearby to assist, the attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the girl into the bushes. Her loud screams seemed to frighten the assailant, causing him to flee. The victim reported the incident to the police, but it was handled by different investigators who treated it as an attempted robbery. The detectives working on Ardath's case didn't learn about this incident until much later. In May, another similar attack occurred, targeting a blonde woman. The woman was walking home late one evening after attending a party when a stranger approached her, trying to initiate a conversation. After she asked to be left alone, the stranger claimed to be lost and asked for directions. The woman provided him with the necessary information, and he seemingly left. However, just 10 minutes later, he launched a surprise attack on her from the bushes. The assailant violently attacked the girl, strangling her and twisting her neck. Believing her life was in danger, she fiercely resisted by screaming, hitting, and biting him. Her cries for help caught the attention of nearby residents, who rushed out to investigate. The commotion frightened the attacker, causing him to flee in haste, but he not before making a critical mistake, dropping his phone. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the phone belonged to Christopher Mears. This discovery confirmed the connection between Christopher Myers and a number of cases that shared a similar motif, all targeted blonde girls of similar appearance. When brought in for questioning, Christopher denied any involvement in the murder or other attacks, claiming he had never been to Green Creek or met Ardath. He attributed his behavior to mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he had never physically harmed anyone. Detectives observed that Christopher had crooked teeth and asked him to undergo a polygraph test. The 5-hour test revealed that Christopher was not telling the truth, but he insisted he was innocent, claiming the polygraph results were incorrect. As polygraph results are not admissible as evidence, Christopher to be released. Over the next 5 months, detectives gathered more evidence by interviewing Christopher's acquaintances, including family members, friends, co-workers, and his ex-girlfriend. The investigation found that Christopher had a tough childhood due to growing up in a home plagued by alcoholism. As a result, he developed attention deficit disorder and schizophrenia. Christopher was removed from his biological family and adopted by another couple who showed him love and care. However, his behavioral problems were too difficult to control, and when he was 12 years old, his adoptive parents took him back to the orphanage. As he aged, Christopher appeared to lead a typical life. He graduated from school, attended university, made friends, and lived in a dorm. However, Christopher's roommate thought him strange due to the disturbing stories he shared, which eventually led to him dorm kicked out. An ex-girlfriend revealed that Christopher enjoyed cycling in Ottawa's scenic trails and had a fascination with tattoos, notably one of an eagle on his left shoulder. A sketch of the tattoo was shown to the ex-girlfriend. She confirmed its resemblance to the one Christopher had. On October 13, 2005, Christopher was called in for questioning. The interrogation took place in a small room, with burly men who positioned their chairs close to Christopher, exerting significant psychological pressure. The investigators began with a straightforward assertion: "We know you are responsible for Ardith's death." Christopher gave a vague response initially. 3 hours later, he began testifying, but his account was confusing and inconsistent. He admitted to being in Green Creek on the day of the incident, where he met Ardith. He was drawn to her beauty and tried to get to know her. He started by complimenting her and chatting, then invited her into the woods, and she agreed. In the woods, Christopher claimed he hugged and kissed her, but she pulled away, Ardith apparently not enjoying his advances. Ardith tried to run but fell into the creek. Christopher claimed he tried to save her but was unsuccessful. His actions after the incident, however, raised suspicions. He pulled her body from the water, undressed her, and buried her. When faced with a murder charge, Christopher immediately retracted his statement, claiming he had never met Ardith and his testimony was based on information gathered from the press. Christopher eventually confessed to the murder, providing a map of the trails in Green Creek where he encountered Ardith. He also identified another individual, likely 16-year-old Laura, who witnessed him with Ardith in the forest. Laura confirmed that Christopher was the man she saw at the time. On October 20, 2005, Christopher was arrested. Initially, he agreed to recreate the incidents at the crime scene but later claimed it was not the correct location. Despite the evidence matching, Christopher's unstable mental state led to inconsistent testimony, and he confessed to additional attacks on girls, resulting in further charges. During the trial, Christopher's lawyer portrayed him as a troubled young man. Initially, Christopher denied his previous confessions but later decided to plead guilty on January 8, 2008, following his defense attorney's advice. 5 years after the murder, Christopher admitted to the crime but refused to provide motives or details. He also confessed to the other attacks. The prosecution argued that Christopher's presence on the forest trail that day was not coincidental. Instead, he was deliberately stalking potential victims, much like a hunter. He had already assaulted several girls who managed to escape. It is thought that Christopher's intention was to sexually assault someone. Ardith happened to match his desired victim type, being a blonde woman he found attractive. Christopher tried to start a conversation with Ardith, but things got worse, and an argument broke out between them. Laura happened to be riding by, overheard their altercation. The killer tricked Ardith into going into the woods, where he attacked and tried to rape her. To escape, Ardith ran and jumped into the creek. However, Christopher caught up to her and drowned her, then buried her body. Ardith's parents supported the prosecution's account, stating that their daughter was a strong swimmer and couldn't have accidentally drowned in the creek. They believed Christopher had intentionally killed Ardith, but they couldn't understand why Ardith had followed him into the wood. As part of a plea deal, Christopher admitted to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. In 2020, his parole application was rejected because authorities believed there was a significant likelihood he would reoffend against women. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Elle Edwards. Elle Edwards, a 26-year-old woman, she was a vibrant and beautiful young woman who worked as a cosmetologist at a local beauty salon and assisted a dermatologist. Her positive attitude and kindness have helped her win the hearts and satisfaction of all her customers, even the most difficult ones. Edwards is a highly skilled beauty professional, known for being cheerful and always smiling. At the same time, she was determined and constantly working towards her goals and dreams. On December 24, 2022, her sister Lucy flew in from Dubai to spend the holidays with their family, and Edwards eagerly awaited her return. To celebrate this special occasion, Edwards, her sister, and their friends decided to go to the local pub in Liverpool's Wallasey Village, UK. Here they were having a fantastic time, laughing, dancing, and singing karaoke in a joyful atmosphere. Without their knowledge, someone with ill intentions was nearby. As they exited the pub at approximately 11:50 p.m., someone placed an emergency call. Shortly thereafter, a minimum of 12 shots were fired. Edwards was struck by 2 bullets, and she's suffering a severe head wound. The emergency services were immediately dispatched to the scene. They quickly loaded Edwards into an ambulance and rushed her to the local hospital. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries en route, as they were fatal. When the police informed Edwards's family of the tragedy, they were shocked and disbelieving. No one could comprehend how this could have happened to Edwards, a beautiful and lively young woman. It was unthinkable that she could have had enemies who wished her harm. In the early stages of the investigation, detectives had no leads. The attacker launched a surprise assault and then quickly disappeared, leaving behind a single shell casing in the victim, who was severely bleeding at the location where the crime occurred. The assault was swift yet clearly premeditated, affording Edwards no opportunity for survival. However, it was unclear whether the attacker meant to target Edwards or if Edwards was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time and got hurt by someone who was mentally unstable. A car of unknown origin pulled up near the entrance of the pub, and shortly thereafter, gunfire erupted. Apart from the fatality, 4 other men sustained gunshot wounds of varying degrees. All of the victims were young adults, aged between 22 and 33. Police initially believed Edwards may have been a random victim of the attack. It was known that criminal gangs operated in the area and the shooting might have been a confrontation between gang members. However, this was just speculation that needed to be confirmed or ruled out during the investigation. To learn more, the detectives looked into Edwards's background. Like the witnesses, Edwards's relatives had no idea who would want she dead. The detectives planned to speak with more witnesses and those who had been shot at by the unknown criminal. They also asked the pub owner for security footage. The investigation involves conducting interviews with numerous individuals and thoroughly reviewing extensive video footage. Multiple police officers were working on the case. It was necessary to answer several difficult questions following the attack. The large number of victims raised concerns about whether the attack was a spontaneous act of aggression or a targeted assault. To investigate, all witnesses were interviewed, and authorities began analyzing mobile communications data, which proved to be a time-consuming task. The media was alerted to aid in the investigation. Law enforcement officers appealed to the public for assistance, urging anyone with valuable information to come forward and visit the police station. Specifically, they were looking for any video recordings that might have been taken by eyewitnesses, which could potentially show the car used by the perpetrator. To encourage people to share any relevant information, the police held a meeting with local residents. It was assumed that someone might have witnessed the attack or have information about the perpetrator. To encourage people to come forward, community leaders reassured residents that they should not be intimidated by the criminals or the local feuding clans. The police visited residents door to door to gather information and provide support. Specially trained officers worked with Edwards's family to provide emotional support during this difficult time. Through their efforts, it was discovered that the perpetrator had left the pub parking lot in a dark-colored car. Although witness accounts were limited due to the darkness, the vehicle was most likely a dark Mercedes. Later, outdoor surveillance cameras confirmed the events. The killer drove into the parking lot, but didn't immediately open fire. Instead, he observed the pub visitors for some time from his car, which was positioned to give him a clear view of the entrance and most of what was happening inside. He seemed to be waiting for the most convenient moment to attack. After a few minutes, when Edwards got out, the killer quickly got out of the car, fired 12 shots in a row, then immediately got back in and drove away. Investigators studied the recordings and concluded that the attacker acted alone, without any backup. Unfortunately, it was impossible to determine exactly where the perpetrator fled. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation, going door to door to speak with local residents, providing a detailed description of the car and the circumstances surrounding the incident. Their goal was to identify the killer. The streets were patrolled 24/7, and within 2 days, they had detained 2 suspects. However, their involvement in the crime couldn't be proven without proof. The detectives then made a public statement, vowing to continue their pursuit of the unknown shooter until they were brought to justice. This was intended to reassure local residents, who were outraged by the rising crime rates and the authorities' seeming inability to stop it. There was speculation that the attack may have been sparked by a feud between local gangs, with Edwards being an innocent bystander. However, this theory was still unconfirmed and required further investigation. It was determined that the intended targets of the shooting may have been Jake and Curran, 2 members of the local Beechwood gang who were at the pub that evening. They had a long-standing and intense feud with another group vying for control of the territory. On December 29th, police arrested a person of interest, but he was not the shooter. Although he had a solid alibi, the detective suspected that he may have been involved in planning the attack. Around the same time, authorities identified the dark Mercedes car used by the killer to leave the pub's parking lot. However, due to a lack of direct evidence, the name of a third suspect was not released. The car was tracked through surveillance footage and identified with the help of cameras. However, the police were unable to respond in time. On December 31st, a report was filed with the police department stating that a fire had started near the scene of the shooting. When the special services arrived at the scene, they found a dark Mercedes engulfed in flames, which resembled the perpetrator's vehicle. The fire had completely burned out the vehicle, destroying valuable evidence. It's clear the perpetrators knew the police were closing in, so they intentionally destroyed one of the key pieces of evidence. Although the fire didn't completely destroy the car, investigators confirmed it was used during the shooting. However, the Mercedes had been stolen shortly before the attack and didn't belong to the perpetrators. The arson was likely committed to hinder the investigation. Following the January 11th murder, police took 2 more suspects into custody in Central Wales, Connor Chapman, 22, and a 23-year-old woman. Connor was a familiar figure to police, with his extensive criminal record. Before the murder of Edwards, Connor began his downward spiral into a life of crime with increasingly bold lawbreakings. His early offenses included a car theft under severe circumstances, and he was repeatedly suspected of robbery, hooliganism, and making threats. At one point, Connor led police on a high-speed chase before ditching the car and hiding in nearby bushes. Upon being caught, he feigned innocence, claiming he had no idea what the officers were talking about and was simply waiting for a friend. This brazen act earned him a degree of notoriety, landing his details in newspaper headlines. Connor Chapman, a resident of Birkenhead, Liverpool, was raised by his grandparents after being abandoned by his parents at a young age. He moved into their house and struggled academically, eventually dropping out of high school before his exams. As a teenager, Connor was considered a troublemaker and had his first brush with the law in 2014, when he was 14 years old, for shoplifting. 2 years later, in 2016, Connor committed another offense by stealing a car. He was caught driving the stolen vehicle without a license or insurance, violating the terms of his suspended sentence. In 2017, he was convicted of possession of a controlled substance, while also violating a restraining order by entering areas of the city he was banned from, all under police surveillance. Connor was prohibited from appearing in public due to the risk he posed to society. However, in 2018, he disregarded the ban and was detained by the authorities while in possession of a knife and banned substances. The same year, Connor Chapman came to the attention of the general public after a failed attempt to evade the police in a stolen vehicle. The incident occurred when the city patrols spotted a stolen Audi and instructed the driver to stop and exit the vehicle with hands raised. However, 18-year-old Connor refused to comply, leading to a pursuit. During the brief chase, Connor committed multiple traffic offenses, including exceeding 80 km/h in 30 km/h zones, repeatedly driving into oncoming traffic, and ultimately crashing into the curb at high speed. The impact sent the car careening to the side and spinning around. Unable to continue, Connor exited the vehicle and fled on foot. However, the patrol caught up with him in the bushes just a few hundred meters away. Connor claimed he was waiting for a friend, but it was clear he was not telling the truth. In court, Connor's lawyer explained that his client had been influenced by a group of older friends who were a bad influence. The court decided not to punish Connor and released him. It was discovered that he had attention deficit disorder, along with several other conditions, which were diagnosed by a private specialist. Connor in question was sentenced to up to 8 months in prison due to numerous traffic violations and reckless behavior. Additionally, he was banned from driving after his release. By the time he reached adulthood, he had accumulated 14 convictions for 30 separate offenses, demonstrating a clear pattern of disregard for the law and social norms. It is clear that he has no intention of reforming and constantly refuses to conform to the rules and norms of society. Although his behavior was recognized as potentially hazardous, there were no sufficient legal grounds to isolate him from the community, primarily because his actions had not yet resulted in serious harm to anyone. The public expressed anger and frustration with the authorities for not taking action against Connor Chapman, a man with multiple convictions. Despite his numerous run-ins with the law, he continued to commit crimes, putting innocent lives at risk. In January 2020, he was sentenced to 10 months in prison for possession of a cold weapon and substances in a public place. The police publicly warned the community about him, and after serving his sentence, he was wanted for at least 5 more crimes. When caught, Connor boasted about spending more time in prison than out, seemingly proud of his record. By 20, he had accumulated 19 sentences for 43 crimes. However, he was released again in the summer of 2022, just 6 months before the death of L. Edwards. During this time, he appeared in court again, and his lawyer attempted to garner sympathy by sharing that Connor's first child was born while he was in prison. At this point, Connor's girlfriend was pregnant with a baby girl. He claimed to have turned his around and wanted to make amends, but this was just a ruse. In reality, he wanted to escape and return to his life of crime. The police were already aware of his involvement with a local gang that sold prohibited substances, but he was being tried for a lesser offense, the burglary and theft of 2 electric motorcycles. On December 24th, a violent altercation erupted between 2 rival gangs in Beechwood Estates, near the wooden church. The gangs were fighting over territory, but failed to reach an agreement. Seeking revenge, a young gangster armed himself with a submachine gun and waited 3 hours to track down his targets, Kieran and Jake Duffy, who were at the Moke Pub. Just before midnight, he drove to the parking lot, identified his victims, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. Then he exited the car and fired 12 bullets into the building. Duffy was seriously injured, but he survived despite the life-threatening attack. However, L. Edwards was not as fortunate. She was hit by 2 bullets in the head. Edwards fought for her life, but she died in the medic's arms on the way to the hospital. Edwards had unintentionally crossed paths with the killer's targets that evening and had no idea the night would end so tragically. The pub was crowded at the time of the attack, 1 person was killed, and 4 others were wounded. A 22-year-old man was shot in the leg, a 24-year-old man was wounded in the arm, and a 33-year-old man was injured in the wrist. Fortunately, none of these injuries were life-threatening. Edwards's friends tried to provide her with first aid and performed CPR at the scene. Unfortunately, their efforts were not enough to save her life. Edwards's sister, Lucy, was much luckier. She had been living in Dubai and had flown home to celebrate Christmas with her family just minutes before the attack. She had already left the pub, so she was not affected at all. Later, Lucy recalled how she had wanted to take her sister with her, but Edwards had wanted to stay with her friends. On January 25, 2023, a funeral was held for Edwards, who was tragically killed in a gang-related incident. Hundreds of people attended to pay their respects to the innocent victim. A hearse pulled by 4 white horses carried her body to the local church. As a sign of respect, the pub where she had last celebrated was closed for the day. The pub's owner also shared a message of support for her family on social media. Connor Chapman was subsequently charged with multiple offenses, including murder. It was discovered that Connor had an accomplice, 20-year-old Thomas. A video recording was found on Thomas during the searches, made shortly before the attack. In the video, Connor is seen handing over a weapon and stating his intention to settle accounts with someone. After the attack, Connor and Thomas hid the stolen Mercedes together, planning to dispose of it later. Although the murder weapon was never found, DNA traces from the killer were detected on one of the shell casings. It became clear that Connor had loaded the weapon before the attack, as evidenced by the presence of red gloves found at his house, which were visible in CCTV footage from Moke. After committing the crime, Connor and Thomas abandoned their car and ordered a taxi under a false name to throw off investigators. They used the taxi service to cover their tracks. At approximately 5 a.m., they went back to the location where they had hidden the car in order to take additional steps to cover their tracks and hide their involvement. Thomas Nord was found guilty of all charges in July 2023 and received a 9 years prison sentence. The relatively lenient sentence was due to his limited prior criminal history compared to Connor. Jake and Kieran, members of the local Beechwood gang, were wounded during the attack but managed to survive. Given their gang affiliation and the ongoing conflict with a rival group, the violent incident was not unexpected. It became known that on December 23, 2023, Connor Chapman's group, including Kieran and his friend, were attacked and beaten by another individual from the same group. Although they did not receive serious injuries, this incident occurred just a day before they were attacked with firearms. At the time, they seemed to view the beating as a random altercation and subsequently went to a pub to relax. After the shooting incident, while the shooter, Connor, awaited sentencing for the murder of an innocent victim, Kieran and his friend were already imprisoned. Kieran received a 27-month sentence for attacking members of a rival criminal group and an additional 9 months for the fight. His friend was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months for a similar offense. It appeared that Kieran and his friend were attempting to avenge the attempted murder. As a result, prohibitive court orders were issued against them, imposing various restrictions. Although this approach did not prevent the gang from engaging in further criminal activities, it did provide a basis for more severe punishment if they continued to disregard the court orders. The public was outraged that gang members received lenient sentences despite committing multiple crimes. It became clear that the existing bans were ineffective in maintaining public safety. For instance, Connor was banned from visiting the area where the pub was located, but he still managed to steal a car and enter the pub despite having a driving ban. During the trial for L. Edwards's murder, Connor attempted to dispute the claim that he was the person seen in the CCTV footage. He claimed that at the time, he was at home wrapping Christmas gifts. Nevertheless, sufficient evidence was collected to expose the facts. The hearings lasted 3.5 weeks, exposing all the incident leading up to the attack. It was discovered that the motive behind the attack was a turf war between 2 rival gangs. Connor had no connection to L. Edwards, he was completely indifferent to her fate. as well as the fate of the other innocent people in the bar. He was driven solely by uncontrolled rage. After attempting to murder 2 rivals, Connor planned to escape to Spain to evade capture. He used a stolen car and disposed of the murder weapon, trying to avoid detection by the police. He also avoided using public transportation. Ultimately, detectives apprehended Connor at the airport. After being arrested, Connor attempted to mislead the police by stating that the Mercedes he was seen driving on the day of the murder was not stolen. Instead, he claimed it was a shared vehicle used by his criminal group for distributing substances. He denied being the driver and continued to try to convince the jury that he was not the one who opened fire that evening. In a desperate bid to escape the consequences, Connor claimed he had only just discovered that someone from his group had used the vehicle to attack the pub. Before the jury deliberated on the verdict, Belle Edwards's father gave a heartfelt speech, expressing his hope that the perpetrator would never be able to spend Christmas with his loved ones as a free man again. The jurors, comprised of P. Asen and Sim Janine, reached a unanimous verdict after 3 hours of deliberation. They found Connor Chapman guilty of all charges, citing that he had committed the crime with callous disregard and showed no remorse for the accidental killing of Belle Edwards, taking away her promising life. Rather than showing regret, Connor spent several days systematically eliminating all evidence and traces of the murder that could implicate him. The motive behind the attack was attributed to a rivalry between criminal gangs. On July 7, 2023, Connor was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 48 years of his sentence. After the verdict was announced, Belle Edwards's father raised his fist in triumph. However, the incident sparked widespread public outrage. The city's residents felt unsafe knowing they were caught in the middle of a turf war between rival gangs. These gangs possessed a large number of firearms and had shown a willingness to use them, as evidenced by Belle Edwards's murder. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. David came from a devoutly religious family and had a relatively normal upbringing. During his high school years at Princeton High School, David participated in various activities, including Bible Club, Chess Club, Science Club, and a cappella choir. David enrolled at Virginia Tech University after graduating from high school to pursue a degree in electrical engineering in Blacksburg, Virginia. Thanks to his exceptional skills in computer engineering, David landed jobs at leading defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She is the eldest of 6 children of Wayne Robinette, a preacher, and Phyllis Robinette, who worked at Walmart and sang in the church choir. The Robinette children's home environment was tense due to frequent conflicts between their parents, which led to harsh treatment. Louise and her sisters were sexually abused by a family member as children. This traumatic experience was a secret kept within the family. According to Louise's younger sister, Elizabeth, Louise played a protective, gentle, kind, and nurturing role. She comforted her siblings during their parents' violent conflicts and protected them from abusive relatives. At the age of 15, Louise met 22-year-old David Turpin at church. They kept their relationship a secret for fear of Louise's parents' reaction. However, when the truth was discovered, Louise's mother Phyllis eventually accepted their relationship, partly because David came from a devout Christian family and Louise convinced her. David and Louise decided to keep their relationship a secret from her father, Wayne, knowing that he would be furious if he found out. In January 1985, 23-year-old David visited Louise's school, Princeton High School, where he had graduated 5 years earlier. He convinced the staff to let him take Louise out of class, and she left willingly with him. They began their journey south, planning to elope. When Louise's parents discovered she was missing, they called the police. Before the police could catch up with them, the couple headed to Texas, where they planned to secretly marry. However, when they were stopped, they agreed to return to West Virginia. When they returned home, Wayne and Phyllis's reactions were surprisingly calm. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter, Louise, to date David. However, when he saw how much they loved each other, he realized that it would be difficult to separate them. So Wayne agreed to let them marry on February 11, 1985, in a small ceremony in Pearisburg, Virginia. 2 years later, Louise's parents divorced and Louise's father, Wayne, took a job as the chief deputy assessor of Mercer County. After marrying David, Louise began to live more independently and freely. Louise was happy with her new life. In 1988, Louise gave birth to her first daughter, and 18 months later, their second child was born. David was then transferred to General Dynamics, and his family moved to Fort Worth, Texas. They settled in a modern neighborhood called Meadow Creek. Louise's family lived a lavish lifestyle thanks to David's high-paying job. Louise, eager to show off her family's newfound wealth, invited relatives from West Virginia to visit. Having grown up on a tight budget, Louise was happy to show off her current success. To make their visit comfortable, David and Louise paid all the expenses. The Louises welcomed a baby boy in 1991, bringing them even more joy. However, by 1992, the Louises were in debt. Despite their financial struggles, they continued to live a lavish lifestyle. In 1993, Louise became pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. In 1994, Louise's oldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary School. She looked neglected, with greasy, unkempt hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene. Her appearance made her the target of teasing by her classmates. In 1995, Louise's family welcomed a fifth child, a boy. Louise's family seemed carefree despite their financial difficulties and continued to splurge on luxuries, treating relatives to expensive meals. When Louise's younger sister Elizabeth joined them on their 1996 vacation in Fort Worth, they stopped at a casino in Louisiana on the way. While at the casino, Louise asked Elizabeth to babysit the children so she and David could gamble. They asked Elizabeth not to tell anyone about this, knowing that it was against their Christian values. During this visit, David and Louise's gambling led to losses. Tensions became apparent when David claimed that Louise had a serious gambling addiction and blamed Louise for their financial difficulties. While staying with Louise's family, Elizabeth was shocked by the family's disturbing behavior. David and Louise did not show much affection for their children and tightly controlled every aspect of their lives. Elizabeth was particularly concerned about David's behavior, as he often invaded Elizabeth's privacy by entering the bathroom while she was showering, making her feel uncomfortable and insecure. In May 1997, the Tuppins had their fifth child. By September of that year, concerns about their eldest daughter and the possible signs of sexual abuse began to grow. In 1998, the family had a sixth child. Although David had a well-paying job, the family's financial situation worsened due to their frequent gambling, which caused significant financial strain. In the spring of 1999, the eldest daughter dropped out of school, as did the other children. Louise and David announced that they were homeschooling their children. In late 1998, the bank foreclosed on the family's home in Fort Worth, so Louise and David moved to Rio Vista, Texas, a less populated area. The new home that Louise and David had in Rio Vista was in serious disrepair when they moved in. It was dirty, stained, and smelled bad. Before moving into the Rio Vista home, the Louises had their seventh child. Over the next 6 years, the family added 5 more children. Over time, the parents, David and Louise Turpin, became increasingly irresponsible and abusive. They physically harmed their children, beating, choking, and whipping them with belts, often for trivial reasons such as not letting them go to the bathroom. The children were also severely neglected in terms of personal hygiene, with some only bathing once a year. Despite purchasing nutritious food, David and Louise often withheld food from their children, forcing them to starve. The parents would tease their children by leaving uneaten meals in plain sight. Instead, the children were fed cheap frozen meals, resulting in severe malnutrition. This neglect was evident in the children's slow development, pale skin, and youthful appearances that did not match their actual ages. In 2004, Louise's family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their old home in Rio Vista, which had become uninhabitable due to years of neglect, garbage accumulation, and rodent infestation. In 2008, Louise Turpin, then 40, had a shocking conversation with her sister Teresa. Louise revealed that she and her husband David had abandoned their Christian education and stopped attending church. Instead, they had become interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that she and David had engaged in wife swapping, a lifestyle that involved having sex with other couples they met online. What was even more disturbing was that they often left their younger children at home, in the care of their older siblings, while they went out to meet strangers they had met online. This drastic change in Louise, who had always been caring and responsible, worried her older sister Teresa. Despite their financial struggles, Louise's family often went to Disneyland in matching outfits, taking lots of happy photos. Louise made sure to send these photos to her family and her parents. The only indication to Louise's family that the children were okay was through these photos, which showed them appearing happy despite being very thin. In 2014, Louise's family moved to Paris, California, about 20 miles north of Murrieta. By this time, the child abuse had reached an extremely violent level. David and Louise had tied their children to their beds with ropes. If the children tried to escape, the ropes were replaced with chains and locks. The children were locked in the room for around 20 hours a day, forced to endure the stench that permeated the air. In 2015, the family welcomed their 13th and final child. Soon after, the family traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. Faced with the horrors of their living conditions, Louise and David's 17-year-old daughter made the brave decision to seek help by reporting the abuse to the police. She climbed out of the window and quickly called the police on the phone. During a tense 20-minute 911 call, she detailed the deplorable living conditions and the countless abuses she and her siblings endured. With photographs of their desperate situation as evidence, she waited for the police to arrive. When police arrived at the scene, they witnessed a horrifying scene: a severely malnourished girl who appeared to be about 10 years old. The girl led police to the front door, where they found Louise. Upon entering the home, police immediately smelled a strong stench that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the strong odor, police continued to investigate and made a horrifying discovery: 3 younger children chained to beds. The home was in a state of extreme disarray, with trash and dirt covering the floor because there was no toilet access. Police quickly took the younger children to Riverside University Medical Center for evaluation and care, while the older children were taken to Corona Regional Medical Center. David and Louise Turpin were arrested on January 14, 2018, for child abuse and torture. Within 4 days, they faced multiple charges. Each of them was charged with 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abuse, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment. David Turpin also faces a separate charge of lewd conduct with a child under 14. Among their children, a 2-year-old child showed no obvious signs of abuse. In addition to being abused, the children were treated extremely cruelly by their parents. They suffered severe physical abuse that resulted in neurological damage. The children of Louise and David lacked basic life skills and knowledge. Although their parents, David and Louise Turpin, bought them toys, the children were not allowed to play with them. They were forced to stay up until the early hours of the morning, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not allowed to go to bed before that time. In 2018, the court took action against the Turpin parents. On January 24th, the judge ordered that David and Louise have no contact with their children for 3 years, and that all contact be through their attorney. On June 21st of the same year, the court decided that there was enough evidence against David and Louise to proceed to trial. The trial concluded on February 22, 2019. On that day, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to 14 counts including torture, abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. During the trial, David and Louise had an emotional reunion with their children. The children appeared to have forgiven their parents and were affectionate toward David and Louise. Each expressed a wish for their parents to be well and shared that their lives were going well. David and Louise sincerely apologized for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success in life. David and Louise were subsequently sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of 2022, Louise, 53, and David, 60, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in their home shocked the community and beyond. The community came together to support the children, giving them hope and a new start in life.